As an enthusiast, I want an age statement. I want there to be an age on the bottle. And if I can't have an age, I want a vintage. And if I can't have a vintage, I want some means, I want some means to be able to go and check what's in the bottle. I want to work out the ages and the makeup of that expression. That's what we want, isn't it? Right up until we consider that it might cloud our judgment on the whiskey before we've even tasted it. I'll see you in a minute. Hello, whiskey folk. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Thursday night. Welcome to the vPub. Welcome to another wee relaxed pocket of whiskey time. I hope you're all doing very, very well. It's fantastic to see you all waiting for the pub doors to open. I hope you're sitting comfortably, and I hope you've got something nice in hand. I wonder what age it is, the whiskey that you're sitting sipping tonight, with the topic going to be exploring young whiskies. But before I get into a wee introduction there, I'm just going to jump straight in tonight and welcome some of you beautiful whiskey folk and dedicated barflies. It's just me tonight. Another wee solo thing tonight. I hope that's okay. I could make jokes about trying to keep it under 2 hours and things like that, but it's the vPub. If we manage it, we manage it. If we don't, it's okay. There will be a quiz at the end to sign off tonight. But with it just being myself, I get more time to hang out with you guys and hopefully pick up more comments. If you're trying to get my attention and you're in the lounge inside YouTube, the live chat here, just tag me as Aquavite. Or if you're in Facebook, I have got the Facebook comments open here. I will try and keep a wee side eye on it, but I'm not very good at that. I apologize. If you're commenting on Facebook, I'll have to pick it up after the live. So let's jump in and see how you are all doing. Fantastic to have you all here. Wonderful stuff. Hans Waldeman is in. Alexander, it's so good to see you, my friend. He's saying good evening. Good to see you, my friend. Gary Carew is here. David Evans, Hillswood, Gary Cobb. Whiskey Stream is in as well. That's Tony, Whiskey Stream 5. Mark Slinger is here. Good evening from sunny Scotland, Roy. It was a decent day in the end today, Mark, on the West Coast at least. It was cold and cloudy this morning as I queued for my second vaccine. But it warmed up quite nicely in the afternoon. In fact, it's a wee bit even balmy tonight. It's about 22 degrees, I think. So we're hoping for good weather over the weekend, Mark? Pete Head is in as well, saying, evening, Roy. Great to end this day with a vPub again. Fantastic, Frank. Always brilliant to have you here, my friend. I'm glad you enjoy it. Actually is here from France as well. Good evening, Roy. Good evening, all. David Anderson. David, I wonder if that's a new name. David Anderson. If it is, welcome, my friend. Nice to have you in. Tony Evans is here. You star, Tony, one of the original, on the first ever vPub that went live, 2017. Back in 2017, Tony Evans was sitting with me, and he's here tonight as well. Wonderful stuff, Tony. It's great to have you in. Everyone, I think you could have been there too. Everyone, so good to have you, Chris. I hope you're doing very, very well. Time for a dram. Gregor is in, as well as Alistair Gray as well. Both of those guys on moderator duties. So if you're struggling to get hold of my attention for something, those guys might be around for a wee while alongside the doc, Macallan Fine and Rare, who's in tonight. Fantastic. Daniel Yezerkak, that's the name I struggled with last week, Daniel. I hope I got somewhere close to it. He's saying, evening, Roy, evening, Barflies, good to have you in. And actually is saying that he's opening an Ardnamurchan Batch 2 tonight, I think. So that means you haven't opened it yet. Interestingly, we know that to be a 5-year-old whiskey because of the blockchain. You can scan that QR code on the bottle of Ardnamurchan, and it tells you lots of interesting things about the whiskey, and it tells you the cask makeup and things like that as well. I believe Batch 2 to be similar age to Batch 1, which was around 5 years, I think. One Glass Man, Warner is in. I got a wee message from you as well, Warner, just before we went live. Fantastic to hear from you. I hope you're doing very well, and it's nice to see you in the pub, my friend. I know you're planning to make a trip to the UK and keeping your fingers crossed that it's all going to be okay for later in the year. Jesse Voicen is in as well. I was there for the inaugural vPub too. what bottles down since then. Jesse, it's wonderful. That's amazing, right? That you could have been there with the other guys for the very first. It wasn't even a vPub back then, Jesse. It was just me being surprised that anybody would want to turn up of an evening and hang out to talk about whiskey. And I'm very grateful that so many of you do. And we've got JG in as well saying cheers. Whiskey Radar Roland, Neil Cochran, good to see you, Neil. Good to see you, Roland. Greg's Whiskey Guide in France. Jaime, not Jamie, is in as well. Good to see you, Jaime. Welcome in, my friend. And Paul M saying, evening, Roy. Evening, Barflies. Cheers from Montreal. Paul, you're very welcome in here. I think that's a new name, my friend. Great to welcome you here. Great to have you. And Richard Hall is saying, evening, Agwavidi. Hope you're well. Good to be back in after a brief sojourn. Really enjoyed last week on Catch Up, but can't beat the live vibe. I think that's right, Richard. It's nice that we're able to watch it on Catch Up, break it into chunks if we need to, all of those things. Tonight I will break up the chapters like I did last week and every other week for 2021. So if you are watching this on the replay, hopefully you can click in the description box below and that'll fast forward you to the segments that you're going to be potentially interested in tonight. Alan Chapman, that looks like a new name, Alan. He's saying, in line with the theme, he's saying, I have a dram of Coquerin heavily peated batch 4. Can't be much more than 4 years old. Yeah, I mean, it's getting older, the peated stock at Coquerin, but it's still an honest statement. So we make the assumption that it's kind of 3, 4, 5 years old or a vatting of that order. Well done, my brother, for a birthday purchase. I doubt I'd be sampling it otherwise. Fantastic. It's good you've got a brother that looks after you and buys you such nice treats as a wee peated Coquerin. Good to have you in, Alan. I hope you enjoy it. Whiskey Central is saying, cheers, Roy. Good to have you in, Sheila. Fantastic to see you in. Daniel Williams is here, and so is my friend from down south, Jason Bradford. He's no mentioning Glen Co 8 tonight, Roy. He's having a wee laugh. See, before I get into the topic, I'm going to talk about that because there is a bit of chatter on the Facebook page, the Aquavitae Barflies Facebook page, and some other places too, and on Twitter tonight as well. It popped up. Somebody came on, just somebody by the name of D, came on and said, anything that you talk about in the vPub tonight is probably going to go up in price. I don't think that the effect is that bad on the whiskies that I talk about. But if I talk about whiskies and I enthuse about them and I evangelize about them, it's because I think they've got a story to tell. They're good value. They're going to be interesting to you too. It's because I think that they represent something of value to you, the audience, the people who turn up here, or the people who watch on the replay. If the price bumps up, you know that I've talked about it at a certain price point live, and then you can go, and if you see a retailer doing what the retailer did in the Barflies page as an example, we know then to back away, not just from purchasing that bottle because the price has been inflated, but also to back away from that retailer, an opportunistic, cynical, and unscrupulous retailer. I share whiskies here that I think the community can get value out of. And if somebody is taking that and twisting that into to make quick money because they think there's going to be sudden demand because I talk about a whiskey, then that's a shame. But we don't need to connect with it. There's millions of whiskey out there. And if the whiskey that I talk about suddenly becomes more expensive, I'll stop talking about it. It's not the same value prospect. The contract has changed at that point. So everything that I'm going to talk about tonight, Jason, is intended not to bring on any FOMO. That is, it's something that is long gone. You can't buy it. You would have to hunt it down at auction or something like that. So it's not intended to have anybody running out to check the retail shelves. There is one exception there, and I was going to slide it aside, but I've kept it in for a reason. It's here for a purpose, and I need it to serve that purpose. So there is one that's widely available. But we've talked about it. Loads of people have been talking about it for a long time now. So it's nothing new. It's not going to excite anybody into going out and finding a new whiskey. So tonight is nothing to do with buying whiskey. It's about thinking about the whiskey that we've already got on hand and the experiences that we've had with it and using that experience to judge future prospects a wee bit better. Tonight, it'll be focusing on young whiskey. Peter Box is in. Good to have you, Peter. Right on regarding FOMO price hikes after I mentioned by you and other YouTubers. Anybody that mentions, or, because it's not just one commentator, right? It's somebody mentions it and somebody else picks up on it. I'll use the example of the Glenturret 12. Stefan Novak finds it in Germany, sends me a sample. I get excited about it. I start to do some research on the web and see that there's other people excited about it too. This is starting to build a bit of a buzz about it. So then I start to talk about it, and then other people pick it up and try it, and they start to talk about it too. That's the job of a community working together. Because then it's not just one person's opinion, it's multiple opinions you get. So that when a whiskey does get talked about, there's a good chance that it is actually a decent whiskey. So if we end up causing a situation where stocks drop or prices go up, it's okay, we step back. There's lots and lots and lots of whiskey. That's not the intention. That's never the intention. It's never the intention for any of the folk that are doing it independently, certainly, to sell whiskey. We know there's just so much whiskey out there. We just want to get together and get a bit of a discussion going on things that are exciting us. That's what it is. And what's the alternative? That I keep it a secret. I find a really good whiskey and I don't talk about it. I don't share it with you guys. The good thing is, if you're watching this, you get to hear about it first. So if it does sell out, that's great, because it's sold out to you. I don't believe that I have the influence to sell out, but there are occasions that the stocks are fairly shallow. There's not a lot of stock to go around, so it can happen, no doubt. Drew from Arizona saying that is the reason I didn't buy that GameStop stock you went on about, Roy. I did not have anything to do with the GameStop stock. With my 17,000 subscribers, aye, not much influence there, I'm afraid, Drew. I hope you're well, Drew. I hope you're doing very well. Benny Fries is saying, I certainly don't need help creating FOMO. I'm certainly more than capable of that on my own. I'm very aware of it, Benny. And I get the sense that we're preaching to the choir backwards and forwards, right? We both know what it is to want that thing, to try it. So we know as time goes on to use our experience to kind of keep it in check a wee bit. Many of the themes of the vPub over recent weeks and months have been exactly that. Menno is in multi-mission. Good to see you, Menno. We need to adopt coded language like Molasses suggested. From now on, you'll become known as Nighthawk. I mean, the thing is that I know you're making a joke, but I do want to make it as inclusive as possible, because some of the whiskies that, especially the whiskies, some of the ones I was speaking about last week and the sessions that I do called The Ignored and things, these are whiskies that are kind of sometimes under the radar a little bit. And I think they deserve a wee bit of love, because I've enjoyed them, because I've discovered that they offer good value, that they're interesting, there's a story. So that's the ones that I want to share. And I'm at the point now that, although I'm not a traditional reviewer, I've covered so many whiskies just in this year alone that the depth of choice, the variety is huge. So to get hung up on tracking down and grabbing the latest thing that we're enthusing about here, just leave it a week. If you're feeling the same a week from now and the whiskey is still available and you're still as excited about it, fine. And if it misses, if you miss, if it goes away, if it sells out, whatever happens, it wasn't for you. It's okay. There's so much chasing going on. I think it's calming down a little bit, maybe, from my perspective. We'll talk about that in a wee minute. But I think things are slowing down a wee bit here and there, now that things are opening up a bit, perhaps. And Alice saying, you give amazing advice and guidance. Thank you, Alan. Thanks so much. You can't control the underhanded tactics causing rising prices. No, I mean, that's the thing. We can only worry about the things we can control. I think that's absolutely right. So we can control a purchase decision. And if we see a price going up, more expensive than it was even the previous day or week, like I say, we just step away. JG is saying, unscrupulous, you make words sound so good. Whiskey Weekend Drama is saying, bought a Deanston 12 to the Aquavita before Heineken buy it. And glad I talked about it last week. I opened the Deanston 12 recently. And it's excellent whiskey. It's really, really good whiskey. Available to everyone, everywhere. Doesn't often sell out anywhere. And it's always at a good price. These are the gems that we want to kind of celebrate, right? And Whiskey Radar is saying, I like whiskies on or under the radar. Of course, Whiskey Radar. Fantastic, Roland. Superb. Well, I've got a young whiskey in the glass here. But before I talk to you and share this whiskey that I've been sipping and very much enjoying before I went live tonight, this is an English whiskey. It's just a very good whiskey. But this is a whiskey I stopped talking about, and we'll touch on that. But I want to talk to you about age generally, because when it comes to young whiskey, there's a lot of it out there now. More young whiskey than we've ever had in kind of living memory for me. I'm sure there was young whiskey before, but most of it would have been blends. There's certainly lots and lots of young blends still available now, but most of it we don't really know. There are some blends out there that'll put 3 years on the label, occasionally 5, 6, 8 years. And that's good. I think that's to be encouraged, because if we don't need to have 10 and 12 and 15-year-old everything if it can be good at a young age. And there are blends and malts out there that are proving to us that they can be good at that age. Definitely. Actually saying, as you get older, the definition of a young whiskey is allowed to change as well. It's all relative. Absolutely, actually. Absolutely. But tonight, there is no ambiguity. The whiskies I'm going to share with you tonight are very young, and I'm going to go through them at the start so you're not waiting. So I'll pick up a whiskey, I'll go through them in order, but you'll know the whiskies I'm going to share with you tonight. And that way you can judge what your bedtime is going to be if you want to stay up for one of them or whatever. I'll share everything I'm going to share tonight with you. I've got my glasses already in front of me, 5 glasses. I'm not driving tomorrow morning, but I've got a busy day, and I'll just pour wee 1.5, maximum 2 CL pours. So we've got a kind of comfortable flight to get through. But as I pour them, that's when I'll talk about them. But I'll have shared with you well in advance what they're all going to be. Good to see you in, Blair Stevenson. Give me a 5 to 8 year old Clynelish any day. Well, it depends, doesn't it, Blair? It depends how Clynelish was distilling at the time. There are patches that Clynelish go through where it's magical, and there are times patches that it go through where they're up and down and struggling a wee bit. But I hear what you're saying about a creamy, spirity, grainy, lovely Clynelish. Presumably you're talking about one at cask strength as well. And Hans Waldman is saying, I like the ability to bedtime plan. Well, let's try that tonight. But first, before I take you through the whiskies, let me share with you what got me thinking about this whole prospect. Tonight's vPub could have been just NAS whiskies. Let's talk about non-age statement whiskies. And I thought, that's only going to go down one rabbit hole, isn't it? Beating the drum for transparency, asking why NAS whiskies exist and what are the different, because there are different kinds of non-age statement whiskies. But I'm going to give you a couple of examples that we will just put off to the side, because we're not going to be drinking non-age statement whiskies tonight. It's been flipped. What we're actually going to do is talk about non-age statement whiskies in the intro, and then switch to young whiskies and talk about potentially what we're courting here, the thing that we're worried about when it comes to non-age statement whiskies, that it's something that they're trying to pass it off as being more mature or more interesting or complex than its age suggests. And there is some truth in that. If I was to ask all of you to give me 2 examples of fantastic value, good quality, engaging, non-age statement whiskies right now, please bang it into the chat right now. Just pick your favourite. I guarantee you the 2 that I'm going to pull up right now will have been mentioned already. These are not new whiskies. It's not going to make everybody run out there and start buying it. Don't worry about it. These are whiskies you have either probably come across, you've had the opportunity to buy many times, and more than likely you've either got it at home, or you've had it at home, or you've certainly tried them. 2 of the whiskies, that is. The third one, probably not so much. Let's see what's coming up here. Deanston Virgin Oak, good one. Ugadallan, Corryvreckan, good ones. Ari Sherry Bodega, absolutely, they are in cask. Most of these have been on before. Ardbeg Wee Beastie, Wolfburn Malvern, Classic Laddie. Some people talking about Octomores. It's probably here because I can see the chat going very, very quickly now. Glen Scotia Victoriana, nearly. I'm a bit cheaper than the Victoriana, but I'm still looking. It's not the kind of 40% supermarket Glen Scotia we've got here. This is Glen Scotia's double cask. Let me hold it up here just for a few seconds so that you can take in that label a wee bit for those of you that are not familiar with it. I don't know if it says on the front of the label that it's unchill filtered, but it certainly does say on the back. It says non-chill filtered on the back. It's 46% ABV, but more than that, all it tells us on the front is that it's from Glen Scotia, it's single malt, and it's a double cask. This is a non-age statement whiskey. It's about £35, £40, maybe a bit cheaper than that when you can get it on offer. It's regularly on offer. You can sometimes pick this up on a flash sale, Master Malt, something like that, or Amazon, whatever it may be. Your local spirit specialist is very, very likely to have this on the shelf. And honestly, I'd be surprised if they didn't recommend it too. This is Glen Scotia's entry level. There is a supermarket release out there at 40% as well. That if I have tried it, I don't have any memory of it. This is a different prospect. This is a lovely, rich, enjoyable, easy to recommend whiskey. Honestly speaking, it's very, very good. Here's another one. I'd be shocked if nobody picked up this one either. This is the entry level from Springbank in their peated range. This is Longro's. Some people call it Longro Gold, but this is just called Longro Peated. This is their non-age statement, vatting, 46% ABV. And of course, it's from Springbank, so we know everything is utterly natural. So you can see the colour here. We can really enjoy this colour in the bottle because we know it's a natural colour. So this is a colour that we can admire. So many expressions out there that don't state natural colour on the bottle. We're left to try and do some digging, investigation, or we're left just kind of to say, oh, well, we can't take it that it's natural colour, so we can't really enjoy it because what it is somebody's made it to a market expectation rather than natural colour. Anyway, I digress. These are two good quality, easy to enjoy, easy to recommend, high engagement, contemporary and widely available Scotch whiskies. Ralfy doesn't review non-age statement whiskies, we know that, but recently he talked at length about very interesting points he made as well about Glen Scotia Victoriana. But I would love to know Ralfy's opinion about these two as well, because the community is alight about that Glen Scotia double cask. We love it. We really love it. It's a very affordable, very enjoyable step down into Campbelltown. And the Longro as well, it's a similar price to that Glen Scotia. Nice, bold, peated, rich, very flavourful peated whiskey, and a different take on peated whiskey from Islay, as you all very, very well know. Let's have a wee look at this again. Now that we all know this whiskey and we all love it and we engage with it, it's easy to recommend this and be confident that you're, if somebody comes back and say they didn't like it, it's not because it was a bad whiskey, it's just that they didn't take to it. So it's safe to recommend. But let's imagine, I know how old this whiskey is. I know how old this is. Let's imagine that the age statement was on this label here. Let's imagine that this was £35, £40. It was Glen Scotia double cask, 46% unchill filtered, but it had a big 5 here. What if it had a big single digit age statement confidently pressed on the front label? Now we know better. We're informed whiskey enthusiasts, and we know not to judge a whiskey until we've tried it. Right? Right? But what if we hadn't tried Glen Scotia double cask? What if I wasn't talking about it now? What if Jim Whiskey Novice on YouTube, who's just reviewed it in the last couple of weeks and loved it as well, he was down to his last drops when he reviewed it. He's clearly having a great time with it. What if we didn't hear all of that? What if we were just walking up for the first time and saying, oh, that new Glen Scotia out there, £35 to £40. It's only a 5-year-old. My goodness. What would we say? I'm telling you, it's a non-age statement, and I'm recommending it to you at the price that it's out there just now. I wonder if it would have had a different impact if it had that age statement on there. Somebody's bought me a dram. I'm going to jump in quickly. Highland Hamish, superb. Great minds think alike, Aquavitae. Just opening up a Glen Scotia double cask in Inverness. Great bang for the buck. There you go. Slancha to you and the barflies. I'll raise this wee glass of something completely different just now, Highland Hamish. And thank you for your virtual dram. Cheers to you. So I wonder how we would have approached this. I don't know how old this one is, but let's imagine it's 5, 6, 7 years old of that order. Theoretically, being a non-age statement, it does say Scotch whisky on the label, so it has to be minimum 3 years old, but theoretically there could be 3-year-old stock in here. And the vatting Makes it this colour, makes it this profile, makes it this rich, makes it this enjoyable. So, but they have to put the age statement on the label of the youngest component. So if they end up adding some nice bright, but something that's done very well in a cask in 3 years, and adding that into the mix to bring some vibrance or whatever it may be into the vatting, if they were putting an age statement on it, they would have to put 3 years on it. Would we be happy to pay £35, £40 for a long row with a 3-year age statement on it? Or even, I think this is going to be older than that, honestly, 5, 6, 7 years old. Would we be happy? As enthusiasts, we would. But there's an argument that the whiskey might have to argue more for our attention, and we might judge it more based on the age statement. Case in point, and we're going to get to this tonight, is Ardbeg's Wee Beastie. I want to celebrate this whiskey tonight, not because it's the best Ardbeg, not because it's the best value, not because it's the best 5-year-old, nothing. But here we've got a big brand like Ardbeg. There's a big brand. And we've been whinging about the Torabhaig and the Ugadals and saying, you know, what's the age of these? What's the age of these? And they've just come out and said, here's a 5-year-old. Take this. £39, £35. A bit cheaper. It's coming down in price now. You get it on offer regularly. Obviously, the prices are going to change everywhere, but this is out there and a similar price point to the 2 non-age statement whiskies I just held up. And it's kind of had mixed responses, right? It's kind of had people coming back. What's amazing about this is that we can approach this as a 5-year-old and enjoy it as a 5-year-old and give it time over the open bottle and take our time with it and understand it more as time's going on. Whereas the non-age statement, we're kind of left most of the time guessing a wee bit. So I'm kind of going to be flipping backwards and forwards here and trying to argue both angles. But I think it's an interesting thing. So what are we actually nervous about? We're nervous that we are being sold young whiskey for a high price. And that's what's hiding behind the lack of an age statement. So let's face that fear. What is it we're afraid of? Being ripped off? That whiskey, young whiskey specifically, is not enjoyable, that we can't enjoy young whiskey. What is it? And then talk about regulations, then talk about what could be the future and things for age-stated whiskies, or how to get past this, or how to understand more. But I'm going to share 6 whiskies with you tonight that the combined age of all 6 whiskies is just a little over 22 years of maturation for all 6 of them. Jeff Whiskey's saying, by leaving an age statement off, does it give them more flexibility in the future to fill with younger whiskey under the same brand? Great point, Jeff. Hellswood is saying, I prefer the Bunamoynia over a Wee Beastie. Nice to see that age statement, though. Absolutely, that's fine. But what's wonderful is we can take the Ardbeg and say, well, we know that this is their 5-year-old product, core range product. It's unlikely that they're overaging it with lots of older stock. They're saying this is Ardbeg at 5 years old, I believe. And the Moynia, we don't really know what's in that. It could be 3, 4, 5 years, or it could be 5, 6, 7, or older. We don't know. It's the Moynia. I agree with you, Helen. It's a fantastic whiskey. I don't want to say anything against the Moynia, but it would be good to have a wee bit more transparency, in my opinion. But I also want to consider tonight, would we judge it or approach it differently? I'll give you, in response to Jeff Whiskey's comment there, I'll give you one more example here. Sometimes an age statement is a drastic misrepresentation of the bottle because of the regulations that you have to put the youngest component in there, which I think is right. That's honestly, I'm not arguing against that. I think it's right. But in order for to have flexibility, as Jeff suggests, or creativity, or the freedom to do anything that they want, a whiskey maker, somebody that's putting together a release, maybe wants the ability to put something that's really done well in a cask in there, add some overage stock in there to really lift the depth and the complexity and the richness of the whiskey, but also put some youthful stuff into the vatting as well to bring a bit of malt, maybe distillery character, a bit of brightness and vibrance, a bit of grip and texture, the things that young whiskey can bring. Look at something like this. This is a non-age statement from Tomatin. This is their Decades II. Now, this is a wee bit pricier. I think this is over £100, this bottle. It's 46% ABV. It's unchill filtered. It's well presented. It doesn't have an age statement on it. But the concept behind this is to have whiskey from the recent decades of Tomatin. So it goes, there's young stuff in this vatting from this decade, from the 2000s, from the 90s, and from the 80s. There's stuff in this that goes back to the 1980s. Now, of course, it's going to be less of the 80s, more of the kind of middle, and a bit less of the newer stuff, I'm sure, from tasting this. That's kind of going to be the vatting. That's just me guessing. But you can understand why an age statement would misrepresent this if they had to put on a 6-year, 7-year, 8-year. I don't know what the youngest component in this is, honestly speaking. But if they had to put a single-digit age statement on this, then we would go 100 and what for what? So we would need to do a bit of digging beyond that. So the age statement could actually be a big stop sign on this bottle. But we would quite happily pick it off the shelf as an on-age statement and say, Decades II, what's this? And dig a bit more. Whereas the age statement might behave a wee bit like a no entry sign. This is just a thought. This is up for debate, of course. I've had drams bought for me, so I want to make sure I catch it. Just as the chat jumps, I do apologise. It looks like Jimmy Legg as well. Jimmy, where's your dram gone? There it is. And Daniel Williams, fantastic, Daniel. So good to have you in. Agree, age means nothing. Look at Balcones. So young, they can't call it whiskey here. It's amazing stuff. Absolutely, Daniel. And Jimmy Legg is saying, I buy non-age statement whiskey, but very few because I know that the people behind it are being dishonest by omission to fool people who don't pay close attention as we do. I will not pay $200, so it's Canadian dollars, for Laphroaig lower. Never. And also the Water of Life, that's Greg Schwartz, has just become a barfly. Thank you very much, Greg. Thanks for becoming part of the barflies, for clicking that wee join button. And thank you to Daniel and Jimmy Legg for your generous drams as always, guys. Thank you so much. Cheers. Let's pick up Jimmy's comment. 200 Canadian, it's about £110 for Laphroaig lower. I'm with you, honestly, Jimmy. Too expensive. But Laphroaig lower is a good whiskey. Right up until you pay too much for it. It's like anything else. If you can pick up Laphroaig lower, I think in the UK is a £60, £65. I don't have any. I've tried it. I'm familiar with it. I think it's decent. Nobody's been deceptive, I think, when whiskies like that are being put together. What they're trying to do is put together a flavour profile, and it means that the age statement, batch to batch, could potentially be all over the place, and I'm not defending anyone in the industry at all. But all I know is that the Laphroaig lowers that I've tried and products like that can be good. And in fact, if I put it down to you blind, Jimmy, in a blind lineup, you maybe not. You would maybe pick it out and say, no, that's too youthful or something. I don't think so. In a blind lineup, I think you would approach it and it could come anywhere in that lineup from the start to the end if you ranked it. And then I might ask you to say, how much would you pay for this? How much did you enjoy this? What did you get out of it? And you might say, oh, I don't know, 120 Canadian on this, £60 there. And then you might decide that it was a better prospect. But you make a point, because if there's an age statement on there, there's a measure of investment on the producer's part that we know it's going to be consistent. Laphroaig lower will have an age statement here, and then the next release will have that age statement, and the next release will have that same age statement. So we know they're never going to dip below that minimum age, which I think is reassuring. And that measure of investment on their part is worthy in that instance. Mikey Hayes in, so good to see you, so good to welcome you in again, Mikey. I hope you're keeping very, very well. He's saying evening to me and everybody else. Grace Whiskey Gary's saying, but I have a big respect for real, greatly conceived with several vintages in them, blends and whiskies. Okay, so it's 2 out of 2, so I've missed the first one, Greg. The greatest improvement, would be for me to allow to disclose the age statements plus the amount of each. But it'll also be digging into blenders' secrets, haha. You know, we don't need to know all the casks or the percentages. We don't need we don't need Ardnamurchan or Compass Box kind of drill down, breakdown. We don't need to know that. But if there was some way to express on a bottle, this is made from a vatting of casks from here to here in order to do this. But it's not permitted right now. Of course it's not permitted. The only way that we can discover that is through attending tastings and hearing from the producers word of mouth or whatever it may be, or backdoor chatter, that kind of thing. And I think that is a shame. It is a frustration. But I think what we're going to try and work on tonight is face that monster of young whiskey, because that's actually what we're scared about here, is young whiskey being passed off as being lesser, cheaper, or in some way deceitful. The whiskey I'm sipping tonight is gorgeous. And I've been on the vPub talking about it in the past, but I stopped talking about it because you couldn't buy it. And when you could buy it, it was sold out. Everybody was fighting over it. But things have changed. It is hanging about a wee bit longer, I believe, as I understand. But if it's not, and if you miss out on it, the secondary market is not overly inflated for the regular core expressions. This is an English whiskey, as I've already mentioned, and I'll take you through all the whiskies I'm going to share with you tonight. This is Bimber. This is the Re-Charred oak cask release. This is the batch number 01 from 2019, but this is actually a 2020 purchase, a 2020 bottling. And we know this to be very young whiskey, but my goodness, this is very young whiskey that's been produced in order to be sold as very young whiskey. So every step of the production, from mashing through fermentation, through distillation, through maturation, at every step, they've fully recognized this is going to be sold young. We need to do the best we can in order for it to perform as good as it can at a young age. And that comes across. That's clear the way this whiskey is made. Now, I haven't been banging on about Bimber because you couldn't buy the stuff. It was ridiculous. I mean, this is core range. This isn't like Unicorn. This isn't, urban legends, Bimber stuff. This is the Re-Charred, which is one of their core range, is ex-bourbon. And the sherry cask one, for instance, somebody was in the Aquavite Barflies page just today, managed to pick up an ex-Oloroso sherry cask release of Bimber from Whisky Auctioneer for £60, which is retail, I believe. £60 for whiskey that's barely whiskey. £60. Where's the deceit? They can't make enough of it. People are beating each other up over the stuff. Now, there are other dynamics at play, of course, but there's no age statement on this. We know it to be very young, but we're still queuing up to buy it. And you've got me tasting this and telling you this is a fantastic whiskey. Now, it might not stand up to 10-year-old, 12-year-old, 15-year-old Scotch whiskies, but it'll stand up to some of them. And what it does do is it brings lots of flavour. It really does bring lots of flavour, and it's a very interesting whiskey. There are far, far too many plain whiskies out there right now, and I think a plain whiskey, a boring whiskey, is more of an offence to me than a non-age statement whiskey or a young whiskey. So I'm going to talk to you about Bimber tonight. I'm also going to uncork 2 or 3 bottles with you tonight. It'll be the first time I've uncorked this on the channel, the Torabhaig, brand new Skye distillery. There's a vintage on this, so there is some transparency here. We know about the age of this. I'm going to open a Balcones Single Malt, a Texas Single Malt whiskey. Now, this is brought in from the States, so this actually does tell me that it's Texas Single Malt whiskey on the front. It's 750ml bottle as well. But it's going to be interesting to talk about that for a completely different reason. I'm also going to get into the indies with you as well. I'm going to uncork this, which is a Glen Garioch from Carn Mor. I think this is last year's Carn Mor release. In fact, it's bottled 2019, but I picked it up last year. I bought this last year. So this sat about for a long time. Why? Because it's a 6-year-old. I'll show the label when we drink it a wee bit later. Of course, I've already mentioned to you that we'll be talking about Ardbeg Wee Beastie, and for a bit of a flourish at the end, we'll be going in to try a Good Spirits Company and Ralfy collaboration bottle. This is a Ben Nevis at 61% ABV, 4 years old, and it says that it's 4 years old on the label. It's a peated Ben Nevis. That's where we're going to finish tonight. So there is a few peated whiskies in the lineup. 3 of them, if you include the Torabhaig, the Ardbeg Wee Beastie, and that Ben Nevis, but that's okay. We'll have those towards the end, and we'll start off with these other drams first. You could argue that by me starting on the Bimber, I've started in the wrong order. I should maybe have gone for this Carn Mor first. But let's see. Let's talk about the Bimber a wee bit more. For me, it's that lovely, rich, jagged, communicative palate. It's nutty, it's spicy. The fruit is, at 1 minute it's kind of jammy and red fruits. The next minute you could imagine that you're biting into like a red, bright, fresh apple. The finish is longer than you would expect from such a young whiskey, honestly. Many of you have been able to try Bimber. You know what I'm talking about, especially on this Re-Charred, which is my favourite of the core range. The ex-bourbon was good. The ex-sherry was good as well. This is, I think, where it's at, what they've been able to do with this Re-Charred cask. This has been my favourite release. This is my second bottle of it. But I say that I did buy them both at retail. I got them at retail price. I think it was £60 when they first came out. Maybe 65, but I think 60, honestly. Tom Allen, that could be another new name, Tom. He's saying, I also have the Torabhaig in front of me. Had to buy it at the distillery. I just could not find it anywhere before my visit. There was enough Torabhaig out there. But again, when it first came onto the market, everybody wanted it at the same time and it disappeared very fast. It's great you were able to get it at the distillery, but the prices aren't ridiculously high on secondary because there's so much of it arrived very quickly on the secondary market. Lee J. Brown is saying a question was asked to the owner of Bimber if an age statement would ever be on a bottle. Oops, it's jumped again, Lee J. Sorry, let me catch that. Roy, a question was asked of the owner of Bimber if an age statement would ever be on a bottle. If there's the answer was pretty much no at a recent tasting. I think it depends, doesn't it? If the age becomes the thing that they want to celebrate and talk about, it will appear there. But Bimber are doing very well with different expressions in small batches right now because it's a small distillery. Don't talk about the London Underground releases. I have no idea what that's about. It's very confusing to me. I don't know how many London Underground stations they plan on releasing, but if there's 270 London Underground stations, that's kind of, I don't think I'm going to be alive long enough to even participate in that. And then I saw the prices and that's not the Bimber I'm chasing. That's not the Bimber I'm evangelizing about. The Bimber that I'm going to talk about is the stuff we can all buy and we can all share. Nice to welcome you in, Tom. And good to have you too, Lee J. Tabitha Mills is saying, it cracked a Ralfy on arrival this week, £48, and we know how young it is, but a very enjoyable dram. And they're using the Chinkapin oak, they're using some wine casks in there as well. Tabitha, it's nice to welcome you. I think I'm very, very keen. I've bought Ralfy. It appeared on Master of Malt at the right price, and I bought it. And I didn't get involved in the scrum for it when it first came out. There's enough of it out there. There's enough of these. It's not single cask, it's not small batch. This is a big vatting that they've released, that if you don't get it at retail, hopefully you have access to auctions or something. I know that everyone doesn't, and I know that some of you are getting frustrated when I talk about these things that you don't have access to. But my point is that there's enough of it out there in the market that you will be able to get it. Because let's be honest, if everybody's buying to flip or profit or resell, nothing's getting opened. Nothing's being tasted, nothing's being shared, nothing's being spoken about, evangelized about. So it stays sealed in a sealed bottle and the price stays affordable. It's okay. There's enough of this whiskey out there, Ardbeg, Torabhaig, Bimber releases, Ralfy. There's enough of it out there. We don't need to have it as soon as it's out. That's my feeling anyway. Rolf is in. Ebhead is saying, great to catch the vPub after surviving the Voi scooter trip back home after 7 pints in the sun. Wow. The world is opening up, at least in our privileged part of the world. You do live in a lovely part of the world, Rolf. I'd love to make it up there to see it for myself one day. But it's fantastic to welcome you here, post 7 pints or otherwise, into the vPub, Rolf. It's always great to have you. Cheers. Good to have you in. Whisky Games is saying, Roy, that was my post on Facebook, sipping the Bimber now. Amazing mouthfeel. Is it because of the small stills? I think it might be a lot to do with that. I think it's got a lot to do with the way that the whiskey's produced, how much they take care of the grain, but also I believe that they don't re-distill all of their faints. So they're being very selective of what makes it through the cuts. This has got a great mouthfeel too. And I think that the higher ABV, or the youthfulness on this, the vibrance that it has, it all just plays together nicely to bring that lovely communicative experience. Let's put the Bimber aside a wee bit. Put a wee glass topper on top. And I'll open this. It's been sitting there too long. The reason I bought this, I have not tried this, but there were a few releases from Carn Mor on the shelf in this shop. It was a shop up in Perth last year, and they were all quite young age statements. And I think actually that's not true. I think I might have tried a wee tiny sip of it when we were in the shop. But I was curious, and the other ones that were available there at that time, I had on the shelf in various guises, but I didn't have much Glengarry. I certainly didn't have much Glengarry at 6 years old. The information is great. Independent bottlers tend to be much better at this. It tells us that it was bottled in 2019, that it's a 6-year-old product, 306 bottles from a single bourbon barrel. So 306 bottles from a bourbon barrel, you're speaking about 220-ish litres thereabout, maybe a bit less after 6 years, not sure. But you can work it out, actually, 306 bottles from a single cask. There hasn't been a lot lost there in the 6 years. So quite a tight... Oh, that's a nice noise, isn't it? Let's not lose the noise. Just a wee drop of this. Obviously, this is not a review. I'm not going to review this whiskey, but I'm going to come at this and think about, is the experience as I go into this, the experience that I would expect from 6-year-old whiskey? Much like the Bimber. Say what you like about this, be able to pick up, be experienced enough to pick up that this Bimber, that you would be able to pick up youthfulness. But my goodness, suddenly I'm getting kind of strawberry candy and sweets, sugars and things, just from taking that wee cover off this. There's lots of complexity in this Bimber. It's ridiculously so. Neil Cochrane is saying, what was the shop in Perth, Roy? I don't remember, but I just still have the wee plastic bag, Neil. It's the one just down from the Inch. So I can't even remember what it was called, but it's a wee shop. And if you walk in, counters on the right, and the corner, the back right corner is where their whiskies are. Yeah, I don't know if that helps, Neil. Jonathan Flowers is saying, having a dram of bourbon, Detling single barrel. You gifted me a bottle of Detling, didn't you, Jonathan? And it's still here, I think. And I bet you this is young. This is from you, Jonathan. I've still not opened this. Although it was one of the ones that could have potentially been opened that night. This is Alabama bourbon, which is fascinating. Yeah, 53.9 alcohol by volume. Matured for 35 months. So this particular release wouldn't even qualify yet as whiskey in the UK and Scotland. So there we go. That will get opened one day, Jonathan. Good to have you in, my friend. So Glengarry's a distillery that's kind of legendary for its kind of 50 years ago when it was still peating and everybody loved it. It was this amazing, amazing Highland whiskey that people went crazy for, especially when it was peated. And they're making steps at Glengarry to try and bring back that traditional style of Glengarry that's kind of been lost, not just at Glengarry, but generally across the landscape, that kind of older school style of whiskey. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do there. Bring back peated Glengarry, bring back floor maltings, do various things. It's 46% ABV. It's been reduced, of course, but there's nothing on the nose that's overtly young or youthful about this. It's in check. 6-year-old whiskey, it's probably the most mature whiskey I'm going to drink with you tonight. By a wee margin, actually. Well, the Wee Beastie's 5 years old as well. Now, if somebody poured this for me and said, what do you think? What age do you think this is? Let's see. Some white pepper, wee bit of chili heat, but a kind of malty caramel, like a malted cereal note, porridgey even, you could say, creamy, vanilla, fruit, not a lot of fruit happening yet. We'll leave it a wee while in the glass. maybe an appley note. I would say, I think I would pick this up as being a young whiskey. But young as in, oh, that's too young? No. I would argue that this is smoother than a lot of blends out there, with and without age statement. This is easier and a better texture and more approachable than a lot of grain whiskey-based products out there that you can buy. Now, I appreciate that a lot of those will be sold for mixing with other things. Have I missed another dram? I think I have. Tony bought me a wee dram and just raised a glass to say Sláinte Mhath. Sláinte Mhath, Whiskey Stream 5, Tony. I'm glad I never missed that. So let me check that I've not missed any others. Chat is very busy tonight. I'm very, very grateful for all of you hanging out with me and coming in to support and talk about these things. I'll try and interact with you as much as I can. And welcome Sean G to supporting as an Aqua Vitae barfly. If you hit the join button like Sean has just done there, you get access to all the wee channel emojis and things like that. And it's just another way to support the channel, because these vPubs are not monetized. That means that you don't sit through ads. I don't get any ad revenue from them. And the reason I do that is because I don't want you sitting through ads. I would rather you just were able to watch the vPub without ads at the start, at the end, in the middle, whatever it may be, especially if you're picking it up podcast style in chunks. So thank you very much, Sean, for supporting. It means that I don't need to monetize the vPub ever. Matt Brown is saying, evening, Roy. Enjoy the young whiskies tonight. Ralfy always pushes a minute in the glass for each in the cask. This just means we can enjoy more in an evening. Aye, that's a good point, Matt. And Emery McGill is saying, sometimes I consider the cost of the casks when looking at NAS and try to decide if the casks used warrant the cost. Age statements at least give you something more obvious to consider. That's what we're talking about, Emery. The idea that the age statement, or at least knowing the vintage or the makeup of the bottle, gives you a measure of investment on the producer's part. What I'm talking about, and I agree with all of those things, and I will continue to rail for them, absolutely. But what I do want to consider is that in the cases of bottles like this Longrow Peated or the Glen Scotia double cask, what if the age statements were on there? Would it cause us not to be as enthusiastic about it? And it's difficult to put ourselves in that position. It's difficult to disengage away enough to focus on logic over emotion when we look at those things, especially when we've had experience with them and we know the whiskies. I think it's difficult to take a step back and consider it like that. Benromac recently released a 5-year-old product, and I know that I don't see it still out there now. I wonder what's happened to it. Did the market react to it in that way? I think that would be a shame. Will Ardbeg continue with that Wee Beastie at 5 years old, or will it be a limited thing? I know they've said it's going to be part of their core range. Please let it be. A big name like Ardbeg being out there and being proud to have a 5-year-old product and keeping that 5-year age statement there, I think is very, very worthy, very important. Nathan Clark is saying, just getting on. Aqua Vitae, have you discussed the importance of considering location when it comes to global single malts, i.e. all my dear friends here in Texas versus Kavalan versus Starward versus Scotland? Nathan, the whiskies that I've picked tonight are to cover topics like that. We won't be able to cover everything, but absolutely. If you look at 2 different 3-year or 5-year or 6-year, 7 to 8-year, 10-year age statements on a shelf from the same producer, maybe even the same distillery, can you really consider that they're the same thing when all the variables are in there? Consider the location, Nathan suggests, of the distillery. If it's in a warmer climate versus a cold, damp climate in Scotland, it's going to be different. Scotland needs a bit more time. That's why we love our quiet, less active casks. In Texas, Kavalan in Taiwan, Starward in Australia, these hot climates, especially if it's dry and hot and the liquid is being forced in and out of the wood and you're getting that super accelerated cask interaction, means that even if the interaction with the wood has been the same in 3 years in one of those countries versus 15 years in Scotland, still going to produce a different product because it's been done in a concentrated amount of time. Whereas in Scotland, it's been done over the course of 15 years. It's going to be different. And that can happen even at one distillery, even in Scotland. You can have a 10-year-old that's been in a mix of kind of mostly refill casks, quieter casks for 10 years. Not much in the way of cask activity. And then you can have a 10-year-old that's had lots of first fill sherry, fresh sherry casks, or fresh first fill bourbon casks, or maybe even some really active virgin oak in there. It all plays a part. To judge anything just on the age statement alone, we know better. We're a wee bit more informed. A couple more drams of Carn. I don't want to miss these from Sandy McDonald. Thank you so much, Sandy. I don't know if that's a new name. Feels kind of familiar, but there are a lot of Sandy McDonalds around where I live, Sandy. Maybe you're one of them. Cheers. It's nice to welcome you in. Thanks for the dram. And Alice said, Roy, thanks for your help earlier this week, confirming my wedding whiskey choice. Another great vPub tonight. Well, cheers to you, Al. You're very welcome. And Sandy, too, welcome in. Thank you. This is all appley now. Lovely apples, fresh apples. Still a bit of white pepper there. It's not overly youthful. I think I would be able to pick up that this is at the most a 10-year-old, but I would be willing to accept that it's 10 years old if somebody gave it to me. Would I say this is a 5 or 6 year old whiskey? I don't think I would be confident enough to say that. There's not enough rough edges, spirity, facets to this for me to say, no, it's a very young whiskey. Glad to have this. This is going to be good for blind lineups. A wee bit of chili. There's not a lot of sugar and bubblegum on there. There's not a lot of kind of young, spirity, confectionery candy notes. But it is there. It is. You can tell it's quite young and vibrant. But you could argue that's one of the benefits of it being 6 years old. This is a good thing. Because at 12 years old, it's not going to have that vibrance, right? It's going to have mellowed out considerably. And do we want all our whiskies to be mellow and soft? I don't. I'd like it to be varied. Anyway, we'll put a wee cover on this Glen Garioch. And we'll move quickly on tonight onto the third. Because I know that, was it Jay that was asking about Texas whiskies? This is fascinating to me. Absolutely fascinating. I think it was Jay. I've lost the comments. I'm quite a way back now. McAlpine Rare Doc is saying, Aqua Vitae, would you eat an apple with pepper on it? Whiskey people are special. Let me tell you a wee tale, Doc. I was at a barbecue on a sunny afternoon in Glasgow. Do you remember that day? It was about 4 or 5 years ago. Gav G is just joined the Barflies as well. Welcome, Gav. Thanks for your support. And we're all sitting outside having a nice time, and somebody brought out some strawberries, and we're all eating the strawberries. And I was there with a patron and friend and a barfly, Willie Dollier. He's often in, and he was sitting there too. And Willie said, you should put a wee bit of black pepper on that strawberry. I said, what? Sorry? Black pepper on a strawberry. He said, Roy, I'm speaking to you. I'm surprised. Surely you want to try it before you judge. Aye, okay, Willie, okay. So we cut strawberry in half. And I don't know if this is a thing. I really don't know. But it's new to me. And it's new to everybody. I've evangelized about it since. I put black pepper on that strawberry. And it was wonderful. I'll be honest, and I'll tell you that it works best for my palate with a very ripe, sweet strawberry. If it's a quite green, not quite ripe yet strawberry, it doesn't work as well. But the sugary sweetness and the black pepper together, Doc, tell me you've tried it. Tell me you've tried it. That's Willie Dollier that gave me that. So, yes, maybe it is whiskey people. But I think that there are other folk out there that's interested in mixing and switching and talking about flavour. Hellswood is saying, Judd just said that very same thing to Doc. It's Hellswood said that she's maybe mentioned the exact same thing. Plastic capsule on this. So this was a gift to me from a patron, friend and supporter, Bill Dull. And he brought it over here a couple of years ago, maybe even 3 years ago. Zero pop. Wow. Actually not a very good seal on it. Do you see how that's just sinking in there? That's tight enough. It's tight now. Let's try it again. There we go. We need the pop. We enjoy the pop, right? Let's see if it glugs. Just a wee tiny drop. The reason that I'm interested to share this and try this tonight, I know this whiskey, I've tried it, not this specific batch, not this bottling, but what age would you think this is? It says Texas single malt whiskey in the label, but this is an American bottling. This was brought to me over by Bill as a gift. But I'll tell you that the age on this bottle dramatically drops the average age of the 6 bottles I'm going to share with you tonight, considerably so. Look at this, it's quite amazing. Says on there, handwritten, you'll see the number just under that little Go Texan label there, aged at least 15 months in oak. I'll give you a wee closer look at that label so you can see some of the subtleties of the one and things in the background there. 53% alcohol by volume, Texas single malt whiskey. 15 months. This is natural colour. 15 months. So yeah, this could be a brand new, super fresh cask or multiple casks that are fresh, of course. But there's that climatic, that environmental thing that's happening in that super, super hot climate of Texas, where it's been sucked in and pushed out and sucked in and pushed out as the wood expands and contracts. And it has this activity. If you leave something in the barrel too long down there, I think it's easy for these whiskies, much like bourbons, honestly, it's very easy for them to become over-oaked and too oaky. Molasses is saying that 15-month-old Balcones is a 200-year-old equivalent in Scotland. You might be right, Nathan. You might be right. I remember doing a great tasting with Balcones at a bar I can't remember in South London. The guys brought pretty much the entire range over with them from Texas. And I think you can buy Balcones here now. It's one of the Texas whiskies that we can actually get a hold of. But the prices are right up there. You know, what you really want to do is get a buddy that's rooting through the States or something and to pick you up a wee bottle and bring you one home. It's much, much cheaper. I paid, I think, about $50 for this, £40 for 53%. I mean, this was really good value. I might have made a mistake. This is actually, no, this is a gift. The one that I bought when I was over in Austin, Texas was the Mirador, a different one. Single malt whiskey, still single malt, but more refill barrels. This is a gift to me from Bill. So what Bill paid for this one, I'm not sure. But that's the only way I can get when I take that trip out for the Bastards Ball. The last time was 2019. That's the only chance I get to get a hold of all of these kind of Texas whiskies. But it's become more available here now, as I say. The trouble is, I think you would probably be paying £70 or £80, maybe a bit more for this in the UK now. And I think that's probably a bit too expensive. So don't be rushing out to buy this and pay this. I would say try it first. However, it is an experience. So immediately I've kind of got that. Immediately I'm in America. I know this isn't bourbon, but there are things here that suggest that style to me. That creamy, almost slightly solventy note at first approach. Very caramel. Very sweet, very inviting. No way. There's no harsh spirit jumping out here. This is 15 months old, a year and a quarter old, right? No notes of harsh spirit at all, even at 53% ABV. Yeah, you can appreciate that there is some strength here. You can even maybe pick up a wee bit of smoke here, but it's not like peat smoke. It's like a savory, salty smoke. So you would assume maybe barrel char, something like that. Everything is red. So immediately, because I smell colour, and maybe some of you suffer from that too. So when you start to think about fruits, you're searching for red fruit and things just because of the suggestion of the profile. But sweet, maple and honey syrup, soft spices, nutmeg, bit of cinnamon, that kind of spice. So much flavour. So communicative, so loud, so bold, drier than I imagined. The nose suggested that it was all going to be juicy and soft and nice, ripe, fruity and silky on arrival. It's not. It's vibrant. It's absolutely alive. Lots of spice now. Drying. Almost acts a wee bit on the finish like you imagine a European oak, like sherry butt or something might behave. That kind of drying finish. This is, you would think at 15 months old, you would be walking up to something that's quite linear and straight and simple. Not a chance. Nuts, roasted. That's the smoke. It's like it's like roasted grain, roasted coffee. Nuts. Cherry. Dark, bitter chocolate. This tastes like nothing else I have in the cabinet. And if it does taste similar to something else I have in the cabinet, it's because the something else is another Texas whiskey. And the dryness on the finish makes it so Moorish. I was pushing the glass away there, and then I'm dragging it back towards myself again, thinking, no, I'm not finished with that one yet. Steve A is saying 22 months. No, Steve, this is 15 months. This is is there a batch on this? Batch, yes, SM. It looks like SM179. Date 10th. No, sorry, it's the American date. 31st of October 2017. I've had this a wee while now. So you can see 15 months, it'll say once it focuses there. If I get my face out of the picture, it'll focus on the bottle. 15 months, and there's the batch number up at the top. And if I roll it round, you can see the date there. And my face is in again. But yeah, October 2017. This has been on the shelf for quite a wee while. You can probably tell by some of the dust that's on there. It was a gift from Bill, and I was just waiting on the right time to open it. And when other Texas whiskies open, I decided to, there was no rush for that. I'm glad this is open now. The Mirador is much quieter than this. The brimstone is amped up again because of all that crazy smoke that they've got going on there with the brimstone. But this is a wonderful thing to share. It's not whiskey as I know it and consume it day to day. This is a completely different thing. Still different from the Bimber as well. Love it. It's very, very interesting. Very flavorful. Ridiculously complex for such a young age. In fact, it's so bold that before I go on to these, I'm going to have a wee palate cleanse. Certainly going to enjoy that. Andrew Hamaker is in. Hamaker. Good to have you in, Andrew. He's saying 36 months, I'd say. Jimmy Jazz is saying 23 months. Tom Allen is saying, I remember doing a great tasting with Balcones at a bar. I can't remember in South London. Oh, sorry. That was the comment I read out earlier. So you were all trying to guess in advance before I told you that it was a 15-month-old. And Bud Jenkins is saying this Balcones Single Malt is a smashing great dram for the $70 it costs. So where you are, Bud, $70. That's much more in line. Juice Jones as well has joined the Barflies as well. Thank you so much for supporting, keeping it ad-free, and you get access to those cool wee emojis. Obviously, if you're in the chat, not just the live chat, but in the comments afterwards. I hope you make use of it, Juice Jones, and it's nice to welcome you in. Thanks for your support. Nathan Clark is saying, I get a distinct pound cake note in most Balcones malts. Pound cake. What is pound cake? I'm definitely getting baked goods. That's the kind of, that lovely baked spice. I've talked about cherries and chocolate. And I mean, this is a very comforting, warm glass to nose. And, the bold flavors that I've experienced when I've been out in Texas, the food, the barbecue, it just kind of makes sense to need or kind of be drawn to these kind of bold flavors. "15 months. Wee bit of youth, wee bit of spirity right there in the middle. Not bad, just a little jag of kind of grip, a texture. just letting you know that it's there." Andrew Hammaker is saying a heavy, dense, usually vanilla cake with or without icing. Ah, okay. So quite a doughy thing, quite a heavy, like lots of butter or maybe something like that. And pound cake is an American thing. A pound of butter, pound of sugar, pound of flour, 6 eggs and some vanilla. Ah, okay, a pound cake, pound of butter, pound of sugar, pound of flour, 6 eggs and some vanilla. Perfect. So it's quite a dense, big, heavy cake. Superb, superb. Excellent. Okay, so that's 3 whiskies there. We've been through the Bimber, very young, 3 years old, more or less, we think. It can't be much more than 3 years old. Certainly not that 2019 Bimber that I've poured tonight, or 2020 Bimber, sorry. No, I think it was 2019, wasn't it? That actually said on the bottle, 2019. Then we've got the second one was the 6-year-old Glen Garioch. So we're at 9 years old. And that Texas Balcones barely pushes us over 10 years now for 3 whiskies. So their average age is maybe 3.5, not even 3.5 years over these 3 whiskies. 15 months for the Texas one brings the average right down. So let's move along and have another wee uncorking. This has sat behind me for far too long. What do you think? I managed to get this when it first came out. I can't remember who I've got to thank for this, but I'm going to hedge my bets here a little bit, and I'm going to suggest that it was Sevi the Alchemist. He's usually, or maybe this was Scotland Row actually, that I bought this online. I was able to buy this online, not get involved in a fight for it or anything. It was there and I just bought it, and a few days later it turns up, it's delivered. And it sat behind me for the longest time, just waiting for me to open it with you and enjoy it. By the way, there was an offer from me, the flight of whiskies that I shared last week. I was going to put a flight together, pack it up, and send it out to somebody who shared their list of 6 interesting level up whiskies in the comments from last week's vPub, not this week, last week. And I'm going to draw that, and somebody will win that flight of whiskies from last week, and I'll draw it on Sunday night with the patron-only lock-in. And patrons, I've got a set for you as well, so there will be a set drawn for you guys too. So don't think I've forgotten about that. It will happen on Sunday, and then I'll go into the comments and I'll reply to you directly if you were lucky enough to win. So this Torabhaig has been sitting there, and I could let it sit there because I got to try it. I got samples of this from the community. And then I also had it on a Glasgow Whisky Club night as well. One of the best things about a club is being able to try all these things. So it helps reduce the FOMO a wee bit, doesn't it? But like I say, around about that same time, one came along at retail, easy to buy. This is an uncorking. So again, like the Glen Garioch, we're not going to go heavy and review this or judge it. It's just kind of sharing the experience. But I roughly know what we're having here. The Torabhaig is a 46%, by the way, and it does say on the label somewhere, it says heavily peated single malt whiskey made with concerto malted barley with an in-grain phenols content of 55 to 60 ppm, fermented with Pinnacle. It even tells you the yeast strain, MG plus yeast, aged solely in first fill bourbon barrels, bottled at 46% with no chill filtration or colouring, at a residual phenols level of 16 parts per million. What more do we actually want? How geeky do you want it to get? They're going to tell you the yeast strain, they're going to tell you the phenols of the malt, and they're going to tell you the phenols when it actually makes it into the bottle. That alone is fascinating, right? 55 to 60 at the malt stage. When it goes through the process and it's distilled and it makes it into the bottle from the cask at 3 years old, thereabouts. It's a 2017 vintage, you can see from the label. It's at 16 phenols parts per million. Well done, Torabhaig. Well done on the size of the outturn, the release. Lots of people managed to get this at a decent price. A decent price? £45? How much would you have paid If you walked into a store casually shopping one day and you saw this sitting on the shelf with a big 3 on the label, a big age statement, £45 for a 3-year-old whiskey, no thanks. Honestly, we need to step out of ourselves and out of this kind of chasing these new distilleries and think about the reason that non-age statement exists. Now, we can't judge this whiskey based on that because this is saying 2017. This has a vintage on there. But it is 3-year-old whiskey. It didn't make 4 years before it was bottled, although there may have been close to, well, would there have been maybe some 4-year-old stock at bottling? But it's of that order. This is essentially a 3-year-old whiskey. Okay, I don't remember it being as peaty as that. Maybe I'm getting it confused with Ardnamurchan by memory. This is very, very peaty. 16 ppm, but this is how 16 ppm plays in the glass. It's very peaty. Jason McDonald's is saying I'd pay way more than that, but I've been to the distillery and have yet to try it. You will get this, Jason, you will. Scott McIntyre is saying evening. Scott, that looks like another new name. Welcome in. Jimmy Lake is saying it is very good, but they tell you what ppm remains. That is quality. And I don't think it's difficult to do. Even although that we know that it's very high peat phenol content in the malt, and it's at 16 ppm doesn't mean a lot to me. I don't have a lot of markers at that point. And it is peaty, but it's easy to reach past and get custard. It's easy to get past. There's a saltiness. It's easy to get past that. To get a lovely kind of delicate, almost floral sweetness. Custard and vanilla. Again, I'm in the baked goods aisle again. I'm in the bakery section. So I'm thinking like, in the UK, we have like a custard slice, a very popular kind of cake thing. And the reason I'm getting that, I think, is because of the cereal thing there. It's making me think about the pastry. It's making me think of it like a salt and sugar topping. And a bright, clean note to it as well, like a floral thing. Linen, peat. Cheers. Excellent. Excellent. Young whiskey, white pepper, some youth there, but that's not the thing that's forward. There's a lovely kind of delicate balance to this. Lovely. This is kind of the whiskey that I'm really, really enjoying right now is kind of dry, minerally whiskies, things that are really quite subtle and leave a completely different experience. So that when the Texas whiskey was all bold and shouty, this is just like whispers, despite that heavy peat. It's a mineral, slightly chalky thing. The dessert is way in the background, still a wee bit floral. Wee bit of apple here, but it's kind of that vanilla custard thing that's just making me think of that. This is yellow whiskey. I don't mind going on record. I taste colours. I know that other people do too. This is making me think of yellow. The finish is a medium finish. The finish is all about the smoke, I think. This is whiskey, like the Bimber, that's been made to be good at a young age. They're not thinking that this can be something else that they can put away and leave for a long, long time in a warehouse and take care of itself and all the edges will be knocked off by the cask. They know that they have to make something that can be this enjoyable at such a young age. Unfortunately, this is the kind of whiskey that screams, put an age statement on the bottle. Not all whiskey is made like this, though. Not all whiskey is made to be sold at this age. This is dry. This is minerally. So that it's moreish because your palate is left wanting recharged, refreshed again. This could be my favourite of the lineup so far, honestly. And that says a lot based on the whiskies that I've just tried. The saltiness I was picking up isn't really, it's not an overly salty whiskey. A wee bit salty maybe. There's a nice sweetness to it. Everything is in check. There's nothing stretched out in any direction. Maybe only the peat, the smoke. But the smoke and the peat tends to be there just at the presentation as you pull the glass up, and then at the finish, in between, there's lots of other things happening. Chalky, again, that minerally thing. I will buy a second bottle of this. Absolutely. This will be heavily shared. I think people are going to enjoy this. I think when you pour this for people and tell them that it's as young as it is, I think they'll be surprised. I've had samples of this and I've tried it at the Glasgow Whisky Club, but usually when you try it on those nights and from samples, you're having it in a big flight with lots of other things. Don't really get a lot of time to really jump in and dive in. But it's just me speaking to myself right tonight, so I can really kind of focus. Whiskey Radar Roland is saying, for me, this Torabhaig is much more South Coast Isla in style than similar to Talisker. Loved this expression in a sample. Very bold decision to compose it so differently than one would expect. But they've just gone all out on that old kind of traditional West Coast Highland style where peat would have been the thing, the fuel. And they've done very, very well by it. And because it's natural colour, we can celebrate this amazing colour. Let's see if I've got some white paper here. I can put behind that to show you just how pale that actually is. This is a very, very delicate pale whiskey, and that's wonderful. We can hold it up and celebrate the colour of this whiskey because it tells us that it's a natural colour, the way all malt whiskey should be. I think that's an impressive whiskey, I have to say. Really quite. The other two whiskies that's going to follow have a lot of work to do on the back of that. £45. This is expensive for a whiskey of the age, but £45 I think is okay. Based on all the other whiskies that I drink and buy and enjoy, I think £45. Bear in mind, this is a new distillery. They need the money back in. They need to build up. I think it's okay. It's not got the longest finish. It's mostly gone now, but all that means is that I want to reach back and have a wee bit more. Peter Lee is in. Good to have you in, Peter. He's saying good evening all. It's good to welcome you here. Vin from No Nonsense Whiskey is in as well, saying, can't say I've tried any of this stuff. Sounds interesting though. Vin, you can just drop a wee line if you want to try any of this. I'll send you generous samples of anything you like, my friend. Good to welcome you into the vPub, buddy. Good to have you. And Mamuka 1977 said it was very good. Fantastic. McAlpine Rare is saying, Crazy Times Torabhaig Legacy 2017 inaugural release is available on Whisky Base from €81 to 225 GBP. Okay. If those prices, step back. That's not the whiskey I'm talking about tonight. Might be the same bottle, but it's a different prospect. It's a different value proposition. At those prices, step back. If you can pick up Torabhaig for £45 retail, or even if you pay a wee bit more and pay £50 or something at an auction, that's okay. I think it's good quality and interesting whiskey. And like I say, we're going to pay a wee bit more in order for Torabhaig to kind of claw back. It's a brand new distillery. They're just starting out, and we need to support that, of course. I understand. But I would like to see it over time falling back in line with its peers. You know, there's a danger out there and that's why I wanted to celebrate the Cotswolds whiskey last week, because they're putting out their product at 30 to 40-ish pounds. And it's a fantastic, really good quality English whiskey. So not all these when new releases come out and they're at £60 and £70 and things, I understand. Maybe if you're lucky and you make a fashionable brand that everybody wants to buy into, you're able to charge a wee bit more. But they can make profitable whiskey at £40, thereabouts, £45, £50. So that's what we should be paying and no more. And then over time, as they settle and they establish themselves and they get a bit of funding behind them and things, we want to see the pricing flatten out close to the competitors. They can't charge a premium because they're the new guy on the block forever. But I think that's a fair price for that. If it's at Doc's prices, if you're going to go out and pay more just because you want to experience what I've just experienced, talk to me and I'll send you a wee sample instead. Don't be tempted to pay over the odds. Good to have you in, Sheila. Sheila is billing people in, 315 in chat, only 149 likes. Please smash the like button for wonderful content. If it is wonderful content, of course, that's the only reason you need to smash the like button. Thank you very much, and thank you, Sheila. It's always good to have you in. Block is saying 3 p.m. Just poured a dram. Bit early for me, but we'll keep it. Oops. Keep it in the chat. Yes, we won't tell anybody. There's nobody watching, Block. Nice to have you in, my friend. Good to have you. And Ben Demon Hunter is here saying, how old is the Tomatin Legacy? Got a bottle last Friday, a gift from my brother, poured smokehead. What did you think of the Tomatin Legacy? Because, yes, it's young. I'm going to guess. I don't know. Tomatin Legacy, 6, 7, 8 years old, that order. Put it in a blind lineup. The first ever blind challenge I did with Finn, and back in 2018, I think it was, Tomatin Legacy was in there, and he picked it as his second favourite. It's also been in a blind live challenge that I did with people that had no idea, and it was picked as some of the participants that were joining that night picked the Tomatin Legacy as their favourite over things like, from memory, a 25-year-old Mortlach. Seriously. So that's kind of the thing. What I'm trying to come at here is that it's almost like a blind challenge thing. If we see a non-age statement like this, we're curious, well, and we don't actually know what's in that, so we want to try it. But if they actually put the age on here, a big 5 or a 6 or 6, like I say, I don't know what this is. The Glen Scotia, I know what age that is. If they put that age statement on the bottle, a bit like a blind challenge, I think we would just jump to assumptions. Absolutely we would. Even I would. Even today, now, when I know better, whiskey has taken my trousers down enough times now that I should be learning, and yet we don't. We're humans, and we're pushed by emotion, and we've got to challenge those emotions and bring logic into it and think about things in a deeper way. Not always think about it from this direction, but from here and that way, and try and work out why these things are. What's the value? What's the proposition here? That Torabhaig is a revelation. This Ardbeg Wee Beastie has a lot to do. I haven't torn through this. I opened this on a live stream of vPub, I think. My chat stopped. Here we are, catch up. And I wasn't underwhelmed and I wasn't overwhelmed. I was just whelmed. And I've gone back to it a few times since, and my opinion has changed a wee bit. I have come to understand this whiskey as being an interesting whiskey. It's come down in price a wee bit now, so I think that's a good thing. You can pick this up for about £32, £32.99 of those kind of prices in the UK. That's good. That's where it should be. That's where its retail should be. But when it came out, people were paying £40, and honestly, people were getting crazy when it took a long time to hit the UK shores, and people were paying way, way over the odds for this because it was Ardbeg. And it was new. But we have to celebrate this if they can bring quality. Why? Because we've got a big name, we've got a big brand producer in the shape of LVMH, Glen Mor Glen, stepping up and saying, 5 years old. Trying to pull us back to the days 50, 60 years ago, where a 5-year age statement was a statement of maturity and quality. It was only through the 70s and the 80s that most of the core ranges and the entry level started to go up in age statement, and into the 90s when 10 and 12 became entry level. There was a time that a 12-year-old whiskey was the premium, and a 21-year-old was stratospheric. Any older than that, they would consider it over-oaked. Really, I mean, 5 years was very, very common. Now, terrace perspectives are spoiled by variety and choice perspectives today. Yes, we're paying a hell of a lot more money than we ever have. Absolutely. But this seems young to us now. So no more peaty than the Torabhaig, but wonderfully sea spray, wonderfully salty, wonderfully sooty. It's a different thing. This is nosing way better. And maybe I'm just having a good night tonight. This is nosing way better than the last time I went into this bottle. It's a wee bit custardy. I like that Torabhaig. Biscuity and custardy. Lots more fresh salt sea spray on this. Slightly hints of what I know a lot of people would call like slightly medicinal notes. Some people like ointments and bandages and things like that. Maybe because of, you know, ideas of iodine or something. But all in check. It's not overly the case. There's dry. It's quite a dry thing. Not juicy in any way. Cheers. This is what I remember. So the ABV is the same, I think. Oh no, it is a wee bit higher. It does taste a wee bit higher in ABV. This is 47.4, and you can taste that. Just a bit sharper, a bit hotter, a bit more chili heat in there, and it doesn't suffer from that. It's just more communicative, where that Torabhaig was arriving in a very delicate way. This is letting you know that it's arrived. This is speaking to you. But it's very minerally, salty. Compared to other Ardbegs, this is a saltier thing to me tonight. Lovely, nice mouthfeel, actually. This is better than I remember. And it's nosing richer as well. I wish they told us this was natural colour. Non-chill filtered is on the label. They put natural colour on here, surely, surely, surely. I don't think they do. But see where they put that in red writing there? Where they put down the bottom, a monster of a dram. That's where you should be writing unchill filtered, natural colour, I think. Then we can celebrate this. We can celebrate the colour of this whiskey. It's actually a notch darker than the Torabhaig in the glass. Don't know if you're going to be able to see it here. I think you can quite clearly. This is the Ardbeg here. Just a wee bit darker. But it'd be nice if we could celebrate that as being natural colour. Maybe some more active first fill casks. We know the Torabhaig to be all first fill. But also that extra 2 years does it a service too. What I should really do now is pour something that's mature, a teenager. Because suddenly I'm in the realm, I'm in the environment of young whiskies tonight, and this is not sipping young. This is much better than I remember Ardbeg Wee Beastie being. This is so other Ardbegs to me, along with the vanilla and the salt and the soot, specifically sooty, they're juicier and they're slightly richer things than this. This is a kind of more drier thing to me. Closer to the 10 than, say, the Torabhaigs and the Ugadals. Shorter finish. I predict what's going to happen now, where that bottle has been relatively untouched. Very few drams from me, 3 or 4 maybe, and the rest I've probably poured for other people that wanted to try it. This is going to disappear quicker now because I'm intrigued by this. This has suddenly become interesting. And I think the biggest thing that we need to celebrate about this, as I've already mentioned 2 or 3 times already, 5 years on the label. Because that's what we're asking for. If we want less non-age statement and more age statement, because we're not going to convert them all over, are we? Then it needs to be ages like this that we're going to see. 7 years old, 8 years old, 6 years old, and 5 years old. Or do it the way that Torabhaig have done it and put a vintage on there, if such is an appropriate thing. Of course, a vintage means that everything has to come from that distillation year. It's different from putting something in that has 4-year-old in the vatting, but maybe a 10-year-old in there too, or something else. It's different, I understand. There are products out there that would do very well to have natural colour and an age statement on there, because we love this. And I don't think our love would be any less with a 5-year age statement on it. However, what I will say is that it would be interesting to see if the community would have embraced it quite as much as they have over the last 3 or 4 years if it had that 5-year age statement on there. I think it would be interesting. But I think the community, I think the drinkers, the enthusiasts, the people that are enjoying Glen Scotia right now, one of the best... Let me give you an example. I had a fantastic weekend in Frankfurt in 2019 at the Inter Whisky Festival, and the tasting of the weekend for all of us that attended it was the Glen Scotia tasting. Dram after dram of sit up and pay attention. And that was amazing because it was the last tasting of the weekend. We were exhausted. And every glass of that Glen Scotia was like a shot of adrenaline. We focused in on every single one. It was wonderful. And this is affordable, more or less, and available. They're making great things. And most of the time, they're putting it out with good presentation. I think you could do it a wee bit better. But we love it already. We've embraced it. Ralfy, he didn't score Glen Scotia Victoriana, but he made an exception to talk about it, and I think that speaks volumes, doesn't it? Talking of Ralfy, a nice wee segue. Let's bowl straight into the last dram of tonight. How are we doing for time? Now, we've not got any game of Is It a Speyside tonight or anything. I've been a wee bit delinquent there. It's landing with me. We're having a wee break from Is It a Speyside, but in the coming weeks, we will be back to the guest format. We'll be having really nice, interesting people coming on so that you can listen to and get their insight and experiences as well. And while they're on, we'll probably be involved in wee games of Is It a Speyside in order for you to try and get your hands on one of these wee sniper coins. I know you do like playing along. We will have a quiz at the end tonight as well, but we've got another dram to go before we get there at 23:22. I feel like I'm doing quite well tonight. Means it's 20 past midnight for my European friends, 20 past 11 for most of the folk in the UK. And if you're watching it in the replay, it doesn't really matter, does it? Andrew Hamaker is saying, in your opinion, do you think that the Glen Scotia 15 is worth the extra $20 more than the double cask? Yes. Is the double cask better value for money? Yes. In the UK now, you've been able to pick up Glen Scotia 15 recently for less than £50, honestly, Andrew, which is an amazing value prospect. I think the retail is normally about 55 to 60, but there's been offers on it that we've been able to pick it up for less than 50. It's a no-brainer. In fact, why I haven't bought it is simply because there's been so many other whiskies for me to buy, sitting in boxes down here for upcoming vPubs, things I've had to stock up on and things. But I should have taken the option to buy that Glen Scotia 15 when it was at £48. It was in the Aquavitae Barfly's Facebook page. What you taste in the 15-year-old is that those extra years of maturity as it moves towards that wonderful sweet spot that Scotch has at the mid-teens, 15 or so years old. But the savoury notes on the Glen Scotia 15. I was at a Glasgow Whisky. I've told this story many times, but it's true. It was Scott. I can't remember your surname, Scott. I want to say McMillan. It was Scott I was sitting next to, and we were getting all these savoury things. We couldn't really isolate it. And he mentioned what it was. I don't want to say what it is because you'll go searching for it. I think I made that mistake in the past. But he said the savoury note and everybody could taste it. It was so obvious. And I loved, when I bought the Glen Scotia 15, I tore through it very, very quickly. I think it was with my brother that we enjoyed that one. And then the Glen Scotia 16, which was a travel retail release as well. We loved them. We thought they were fantastic. Slightly different, but still kind of a similar theme. And the extra age plays, you can taste it. $20 doesn't sound a lot to move from the double cask to the 15, honestly. But if all you can get, and if it's a good value, is the double cask, just buy it, Andrew. You're going to love it. Thank you. I can purchase a Glen Scotia for about $50, $70 for the 15-year-old. That's incredible value. That's about £40 for a 15-year-old Glen Scotia. Buy a couple. That's amazing. Buy one, hope you like it, and you can go back and be able to buy more at the same price, Andrew. Hillswood is saying, looking forward to the travel vPub prior to us heading away to Islay in September. Next week, the vPub is going to be inviting somebody that's been around Scotland and travelled, and she's going to share her experiences and share her tips and things. And that's Leanne from Scotch on the Bayou. And immediately after we've spoken to Leanne, we're actually going to bring a friend of mine in who runs a company specifically focused on putting together experiences and suggestions and itineraries and tours and events and things for people who are coming to visit Scotland. And he's going to come in, Aníos O'Hara from Away from the Ordinary is his company. He's going to come on and just share some insight and not to sell his product or what he does or anything like that, but to give insight into how you need to plan and what you need to consider and what you should prioritize if you're planning to come to the UK generally. But obviously we're going to kind of focus on that idea of visiting Scotland. The biggest question I get asked day to day, I would say, and especially this time of year, is Roy, we're planning a trip. Roy, we're planning a trip. And it's very difficult for me to go back and respond to all of these messages. So it's by far the most likely message that's going to fall through the cracks because there's a lot of thought to be put into it, a lot of effort. So it's difficult for me. So it's been a long time coming for me to do the vPub of that topic. I haven't done it until now. Why? Obviously the pandemic last year and a half, it's not very good to talk about planning travel. But now that things are opening up again, now is the right time to be planning for next year. Seriously, next year. We don't have enough accommodation in this country. Matt Brown is saying, Andrew Hamaker is saying done. Matt Brown is saying, I've just acquired a bottle of the Glen Scotia 16 in the last week. I was back and forth on whether to buy it. Your recycled review tipped meet the scales in my favour. Fantastic dram. Thanks. I think it's going to become more fantastic. You're going to bond with that more as you get through that very complex wee Campbelltown 16-year-old. Matt, I'm glad you're enjoying it, honestly. Okay, we talked about Ralfy. This is a collaboration between Ralfy and Glasgow, the Good Spirits Company. How many's in here now? 300 of you still in. I've got a tip for you. One per customer. There's not going to be many left, but I did the Good Spirits Company 10-year birthday tasting on Friday night of last week. And they released the bottles for us to buy. First on the tasting, it was going to be restricted over the weekend, but the following week, which is this week, they were opening it up. There's a Benrinnes available from them, which is a 10-year-old Benrinnes from North Star at 50-point-something%. And it's only £57. That's fabulous because it's post-partial triple distillation for Benrinnes. And yet it's still got that big, lovely, full-bodied, lots of fruit, lots of aniseed and licorice, fantastic Benrinnes for a very, very good price. There's plenty of that available. But if you're here now at this time, your tip, they've got for their 10th birthday, it's £95. It's a lot of money. But if you go on the Good Spirits Company website right now, you can buy a 30-year-old Girvan for £95. It's got a big 10 on the label. It's not 10 years old. It's their 10th birthday bottle. It's 30 years old, single grain whiskey from Girvan, and it's wonderful. It's wonderful. It's only one pair. I've already bought mine, and I bought the Benrinnes too. That's your tip. I know that I said this wasn't going to be a FOMO pub. It wasn't going to be that. But if you're going to spend that kind of money on something nice to treat yourself, the boys at the Good Spirits Company have pulled a blinder out. Blair Stevenson, he's saying, I bought the Glen Scotia 15 from now Ryan Sutherland. I wonder if he's in tonight. He was on that same tasting. He can back me up on this. Who else do I know that was in? Oh, Sevi the Alchemist was in. There's a few other folk in as well. Blair is saying, I bought the Glen Scotia 15 from the whisky shop on sale for £35. It screwed my perspective of Glen Scotia pricing for ages. That's right, but what a bargain you got for that, Blair. That's amazing. Che Francis saying the Benrinnes was not limited, but it was a belter. Ordered it immediately after the tasting. It's just the weight and the texture and the going back, and I didn't have enough of it. Now, it's a pre-order, the Benrinnes, so you're not going to get it till the end of June, but if you buy anything else, they'll hold it and ship it to you at the same time. That's what's happened for me. They're holding on to the other things that I bought. But it's just for the folk that have hung out to the end, honestly. It was just amazing. Anyway, I'm going to pour this wee Ralfy bottle, but a collaboration, as I say, for about the 4th time between Ralfy and the Good Spirits Company. This was to celebrate Ralfy's 10 years. This was a Ben Nevis. We know Ben Nevis. It's that really bold, old school Highland style. Usually does best because of how bold the spirit is. It usually does best in a sherry cask. Well, what we have here is, I believe it to be, it doesn't say on the label actually, but I believe this to be a first fill bourbon. Don't quote me on that. That's my memory and recollection of it. But this is this is actually signed. I should have kept this actually because it's from Ralfy and it's signed to me. But it's 4 years old. Now, the reason this is open and I'm drinking this is it was one pair. I was allowed to buy a second one, which is hanging about somewhere. It's up here. And it was a giveaway. I bought it in order to give it away to celebrate Ralfy's 10 years with John Bortle, who won it, a patron. And I'm just waiting for John to arrive in the UK from the States in order to gift it to him. This was eye-opening to me because I was cynical. 4-year-old Ben Nevis. It's a chunky, chewy, beefy whiskey. Why are they putting it out there at 4 years old? I should have known better. The first thing that strikes you, and the reason that this is the last dram of tonight, I'm going to be so sad when this is gone, is it's a bit of an onslaught. It's very heavily peated Ben Nevis. It's very rich. Typical Ben Nevis. So it's not old school in a kind of farmyard funk style. Ben Nevis always strikes me a wee bit more of a kind of more industrial style. It's almost like leather and mechanical environment. It's almost like you're standing in an engineering shop or a garage or something like that. Plum, ripe, overripe plum. It's slightly bitter, like maybe like a jam, rich, but some slight bitterness in there. Tobaccos and leather. This is from 4-year-old whiskey. There's a confectionery thing here, but it's like a boiled fruit sweets. Searching. We've been talking about strawberries and black pepper. It's in my head, it's here. Cheers. Spice. 61% ABV. It's been parked right at the end because of all this rich flavour and this spice. And this high ABV as well. This is like one of those kind of wake-up drams. It's not going to let you have a relaxing discussion. It wants your attention. There's heat here from the ABV. It works well with those spices. Stomps all over the fruit. But the fruit is still there. That a lot of the spice and the fruit that you're getting, I'm certain this is ex-bourbon. A lot of the fruit and the spice that you're getting is slightly reminiscent of what you might get from sherry cask, a refill sherry cask or something. So it's not all vanilla and caramel. What's actually happening here is the peat is in the mix to bring in more kind of savoury and spiced elements to this. It's preserved fruit jamminess. There is a kind of strawberry thing, and it's chewy. Where the two peated ones that I've had tonight, the Torabhaig and even the Ardbeg Wee Beastie, were kind of minerally and drier things, this is still sitting. This is heavy. Excellent. Excellent. 4 years old. So if we add these up, let's see if I can remember and recall everything that we've had tonight. A 3-year-old Bimber. We moved on to a 6-year-old Glen Garioch. We moved on to a 15-month-old Balcones, a 3-year-old Torabhaig, a 5-year-old Ardbeg, and we're now sitting in front of a 4-year-old heavily peated Nevis. If we add up the cost of all of these whiskies, what I paid or what I would pay, I'm using the Balcones as if I'd bought it there myself. It was a gift to me. But if I'd bought it there in Texas, obviously would have to pay a wee bit more now. We're in the order of about £220, £230 for 6 bottles. So well within that £250 collection limit that I tend to put on these things. But the age of all of these combined is about 22 years. The average age, therefore, is somewhere around a bit less than 3.5 years old. Every single whiskey I've sipped tonight is sit up and pay attention whiskey. There's a huge but coming. What are we afraid of with non-age statements? What is anyone afraid of? What is actually happening is the industry has taught people that age is very important. Over the last 30 years, they're now paying for that because those deep stocks that allowed them to bump up the age over the years has gone. So now they're going back, but it's different times. The whiskey's made differently. It's being made to be sold at a younger age than it ever did. Everything is different. But all of the whiskies I've enjoyed tonight have been purposely put together, with perhaps the exception of the Glen Garioch, maybe with the exception of also the Nevis as well. This is kind of an anomaly for this to happen, perhaps. But the Glen Garioch as well was perhaps not put in cask with a view to selling it at such a young age. But the rest of them certainly were designed to be sold young. Bimber, yes, absolutely. Texas Balcones, maybe not 15 months as this one is, but yes, certainly measured in months rather than years. Torabhaig, yes, certainly. Ardbeg Wee Beastie, maybe not originally, but by the time it was 5 years old, they decided to go ahead with it. So it was obviously good enough to be sold at 5 years old. Young whiskey can be every bit as engaging and as fabulous as entry-level 10 and 12-year-olds, as teenage whiskies, mature product. Now, if you were to ask me, Roy, I'll trade you all 6 of the bottles that you've shared tonight for 1 bottle of Glengoyne 25, 1 bottle of Arran 25, something of a semi-premium state, it would cause me pause to stop and think. I wouldn't just yet say no or yes straight away. I would stop and consider it. And maybe after I'd actually sat down and sipped through 6 of these tonight with good company, with people who I could actually enjoy it with and get some, perspective and other input from, I'm going to suggest to you that I would pick the 6 bottles, not because I'm getting more whiskey, because I'm getting more engagement. Glengoyne 25 is one of my all-time favourite things. It's just an amazing bottle. I tried that Arran 25 as well, and it was absolutely wonderful stuff. I would love to have them. But this, it's about sharing. It's about the ability to drink it with other people and enjoy it. It's about the ability to explore these whiskies, to not have to pay through the nose for a 70 cl bottle. I think producers have the right to keep non-age statements in place. There's a place for it. There is a place for it all over the place. Things like this. I understand why this is non-age statement. If you consider things like releases from Deanston that have celebrated casks over the years as well, huge vattings and things, that an age statement would betray the quality of the liquid inside. I understand. Tomatin have done it on their Element series as well. We understand why these things exist. There is a place for non-age statement. Signet is another great example. This, I'm a wee bit ambivalent about. They're trading on this name. We know this is going to be amazing. I've yet to have something from Springbank that, okay, some of them I don't really enjoy because they're too extreme in some direction, but they're fabulous and very, very interesting whiskies and loved by many, most. But there's an argument that there should maybe be a young age statement on this. Certainly that's true for this. I would love to see them building on the success that they've had with this. And even if it's not a big, huge single-digit number, they could write it on the back. This has been aged for a minimum of 5 years. And wee letters. And while they're redoing their label to put wee letters, tell us that it's natural colour and make it natural colour. Keep the 46% ABV and you've got very, very happy whiskey enthusiasts. And you know what? Stop discounting it. Put it out there at retail. We'll pay retail for it. Maybe it's not you that's discounting it, I understand. We don't need to be afraid of non-age statement whiskies because we work very well as a community. We work together to find out where the value is. We can tell each other when things are youthful and we feel that it's been bottled in a cynical way. We can also work together in the case of the Longrow and the Glen Scotia and many, many others and talk about when this is not an age statement, but it's actually really good. You should try it. I think we're getting to the stage now where the industry can actually say, folk are enjoying young whiskey, 3-year-old whiskey, 5, 4, 6-year-old whiskey, and they're paying £40, £45, £50 in the case of the Bimber, and maybe in the Balcones these days, much higher than that, just for the experience. They are ready to be told that it's young whiskey, and they'll be okay with it. What say you? Peter Lee saying, can you say hello to my son Lawrence Lee as he is watching right now? I'll do more than that. I'll say, I don't know what age Lawrence is actually, Peter, but I'll say hello over a wee glass of whiskey. Lawrence, I hope you're enjoying me havering. There's a Scottish word for you, Lawrence. I hope you're enjoying watching tonight. It's nice to have you and your dad in. Cheers, Peter. Cheers, Lawrence. And Ben Demon Hunter is saying, I was supposed to connect with you on Aquavita Facebook, correct? My apologies, I only remembered. Oh, he's talking to Eric Cunliffe, I think. After the vPub doors opened, we'll need to do that tonight. Excellent, Eric and Ben, hopefully both in Canada together. Great. Time for a dram. Gregor is saying, when designed to be sold young, what effect can we expect when same distillate is aged for longer? I mean, I think there was no exercise tonight to do that. There was no kind of vertical tasting going for the same distillate from the same distillery at various ages. But in the case of things like Bimber, in the case of things like Texas Balcones, Torabhaig even, these whiskies have been produced with a view to them being bottled at a young age. It was always going to be bottled at a young age. So they've always had that in mind. How that's going to be going forward when they become more mature, we don't know. But we can assume that what's going to happen is that maybe we'll get more cask influence coming in. Maybe we'll get more complexity there. Maybe we'll get more of a mellowing effect, more of an integrated product as the years go by. That's what we hope. My point is, Gregor, that right now we're able to taste things that are very, very youthful. 6 whiskies that combined age is 22 years. And all of them, honestly, all of them are enjoyable whiskies. They really, really are. Very enjoyable. And we can't find Rare Doc said, I had Peter Ben Nevis, indie 4-year-old in a tasting with 60 people or so on a whiskey show. Average age guess was about 17 years, bought 3 bottles. There's a good chance Doc, that it's the other half of this cask. 40 of 155. If I remember well, this is only half the cask. Now, don't quote me on that. You need to treat that lightly. But I think that there's a story out there that the other half of the cask went elsewhere. And if it's heavily peated 4-year-old, there's just a chance that it could be, especially if it's from a quite active bourbon cask. Be interesting if it was the same thing. Maybe we could try it together. Peter Lee saying, Lawrence is 21 years old, so I did the right thing to say cheers to Lawrence over a glass. Fantastic. And he's saying cheers right back to me. Superb. Okay, to everybody, it looks like Leanne from Scotch in the Bayou is in. I know she's away on a trip this weekend. It's wonderful to have welcomed her in here before she went or while she's on her trip. Fantastic, but I've already suggested that Leanne's going to join us and share her experiences about travelling around Scotland next week in order to give you some tips and insights about what you should expect and what you should maybe plan for, as well as bringing in Ania Sohara from Away from the Ordinary to give some real kind of professional end tips about how to structure things, what to focus on, what your priorities should be. There's a multitude of people out there that can help you that have been here and done it. One of the best people to speak to could be Doc McCallan, Fine and Rare. If you've got any questions or things, you can maybe connect with Doc and hear that he might be willing to help, just as every other barfly that's already made that journey / pilgrimage, dare I say, they've had the experience and they've realised what they would maybe do differently the next trip, what they've found to be very helpful, and what they've found that they would switch up and change a wee bit next time. It's part of the community as well, but that's the focus on next week's pub. The week after that, the last vPub in June, I'm going to be welcoming back Stefan K. I know you like him a lot. I like him too. I love listening to Stefan. I love his insight and his canny analytical thoughtfulness about whiskey. He's going to come on to compare old versus new. That is, I'm going to take contemporary bottles that everyone can buy, core range, cheap, available, not cheap, good value and available. And I'm going to have tracked down or grabbed something that I have on hand, a vintage representative of the same thing. And we're going to try 3, 4, perhaps 5 at the most drams, comparing backwards and forwards to see how they've changed and consider how whiskey itself has changed in that time. So that's the rest of June mapped out. So the last 2 weeks have been solo affairs with me. I hope that's okay for you. Anybody that's interested in hanging around for the quiz at the end, please do that. I have a good and interesting quiz for you. And I think there's lots of easy ones in there, but maybe a couple of banana skins too. I sent it to the Doc, and Doc managed a 9 out of 10 and slipped up on only 1. So his rating tonight is possible. I think he said difficult but achievable were his words. Graham Fraser is saying Ralfy has an opinion on Nass whiskies. Absolutely. But as I've said at the opening tonight, Graham, I would love to know what Ralfy thinks of this long roll. I would love to know what Ralfy thinks of the Glen Scotia double cask. Glengoyne Legacy, which, by the way, is where if somebody comes to me now and says, Roy, I want an affordable sherry cask, but I want it to be a sherry cask and representative of sherry-style Scotch whiskey, what would you recommend? Glengoyne Legacy. Because I'm not sending them to the Revival right now from Glendronach, whereas where I used to send them to. So I've been kind of looking for a replacement to that. Glenturret 12, it's difficult to get a hold of. You're suddenly asking them to pay £65. Glengoyne Legacy is nothing close to that. It's an excellent dram. Chapter 2 is out and available now. Still lots of Chapter 1 out there in the supply chain. Try it with Parmesan cheese. Gregor McQuee, I hope you've done that already. And Eric Cunliffe is saying, sadly, it'll be another birthday not spent in the motherland. Maybe the 32nd birthday. Meet you in the Springbank Warehouse. The location is not important. The fact that we meet is, Eric. You will make it. It's just a question of being a wee bit more patient, my friend. And I'm looking forward to raising a glass with you when you do that. I'll see you on Sunday night in the lock-in, Eric. Whiskey Games is saying, off to bed now. Sleep off my second vaccine. I had mine today as well, Matthew. Good for us. And a good dram of Bimber. Good for you, Matthew. Thanks very much for joining us. Please pick up the quiz on the replay. Jimmy Legg is saying, lol, I send them to Abuna. That's because you're paying a reasonable price for Abuna. Abuna especially if it's somebody just getting into whiskey. Abuna is really, really, really high up there in the ABV. It's really hot. It plays very chilly, hot to a lot of people that are coming into whiskey. So you're looking for the ABV to be down. Glengoyne Legacy is 48%, and it doesn't taste like it. It sips more like a 43, I feel. And Rob Halford is in. Good to see you, Rob. Which edition of the Legacy do you prefer? I've not spent enough time with edition 2 yet. I've only had a single sample of it. And it was just, to me, to my memory, it was every bit as good as the first one. I've not even read any reviews or anything like that. So probably what's going to happen is I just gifted my bottle of Chapter 1 to Roberto around the corner, so that he could spend a bit of time with it. Hopefully, we'll maybe get a chance to sip a wee dram together. But that means that I have a space now where the Glengoyne Legacy used to sit, so I'll maybe put the Chapter 2 in there. Wonderful stuff. I hope you're all ready for a wee bit of a quiz at the end. 23.50. I kind of fancied that I might manage close to 2 hours, but maybe not. Listen, I know a lot of you take your leave now and you'll pull a wee parachute and go out and skip the quiz. That's okay. I know that just some of you enjoy the quiz. I know that I can never do away with the quiz, but anybody that are taking the leave just now and you maybe pick up the quiz on the replay, I'll say thank you very much. But to those of you that are staying for the quiz, you will enjoy it. Cheers, everyone. Thank you. Jesse is saying, I'll go ahead and take my 10 out of 10 now, lol. ACCBA, BBCCA. I think that could be a 10 out of 10, Jesse. Let's see. Let's pull up this wee screen share here. Well, yes, it works. Okay, good. Multiple choice, as always. If you see a banana skin, it's something that you need to pause and have a wee head scratch about and think twice about. If you see an ass hat, it's deliberately awkward or difficult, but meant to provoke some thought. Or sometimes, of occasion, the ass hat can just be in there to be a wee difficult question, just to make it not completely, because you're all becoming so much more knowledgeable as the weeks go by. That's what I feel like anyway. I'm going to have to keep studying a hell of a lot more to keep up with you guys. You're doing amazingly, amazingly well. Anyway, good luck, everybody. Pass mark is always 5 out of 10, and it's always multiple choice. Question 1. Diageo have released their oldest ever Singleton of Dufton at A, 54% ABV, B, 54 years old, or C, £54,000 retail price. The oldest ever Singleton of Dufton has just been released. Did they release it at 54%? Did they release it at 54 years old? Or did they release it at £54,000 retail? Notice that there is no banana skin here. I'm not trying to trip anyone up. I'm hoping this is an easy, straightforward intro into the quiz at the end tonight. Yes, absolutely. The lounge full of knowledgeable people. Peter O'Neill, good to have you in, Peter. Thinks it's B. Matt Brown is covering these. He says D. Radu Franco is in. Good to have you. Saying B. Lindsay Holman, good to see you. Jerry Miller and Ebhead Rolf all saying B. Just Jones saying B. Scotch on the Bayou and Bruno Martin saying B, as well as pretty much everybody else. Absolutely spot on. 54 years old. It isn't £54,000 retail, but it is a salty £28,000 retail. It's half that price though, so it's a snip of 28 grand, right? It's not 54% ABV. It's I think from memory, just a smidge over 50% ABV, but don't quote me on that. I'm not sure. Could be a wee bit less at 54 years old. No, wait a minute now. That was down at 44, was it? Doesn't matter. 54 years old. B was the answer I was looking for, and here's a wee picture of it. That's less of a bottle of whiskey and more of a bottle coming with its own altar, right? There was a time that I would have been intrigued by that, but now I find it vulgar and something that I don't even, it's a life that I'll never lead. So I don't have any real desire or curiosity. If somebody offered me one, sure, it'd be lovely, but there'd be a lot of pressure just even enjoying a dram of that, right? I'm sure I'd cope. Question 2. The 2021 Fashil ended on Sunday, the 6th of June. It's just finished up on Sunday at the weekend there. How many days did this year's festival programme run? How many days did they fill for Fashil in 2021? Obviously, the last 2 years has been a virtual event. They did a great job of bringing lots and lots of virtual things for us while we're all missing Islay. But I'm just asking, how many days did they do it over? A, 7, B, 9, C, 11. A, 7, B, 9, C, 11. Jimmy Jazz, good to see him. He's helping out, giving me that clear line so I can see where question 2 is starting. Superb. Ooh. Pure Guess says Jesse Voisin. Too Slow is in. Good to see you, Rob. He's saying B. Scott McIntyre, and it's good to see you in, Scott. And Andrew Hamaker is saying B. Lots and lots of people saying B. Jimmy Jazz, Hellswood. Matt69 says C. Scotty S. Good to have you in, Scotty, is saying C as well. Eric Cunliffe. Epic Rolf says C. And all those guys are absolutely spot on. It is indeed 11 days. And that's kind of really interesting. It used to be a week-long festival. Now they're now out to 11 days. And that's because there are now 9 distilleries on Islay. They did have a day off this year because Cleela is closed, but they have the opening day. But they also have Ardnahoe opening, kicking things off. And then it runs all the way through the 9 Islay distilleries, but also includes Jura as well. So it ends up being an 11-day event. Question 3. There was, interestingly, a wee banana skin for question 2. I hope that might have helped some of you a wee bit. Question 3, Kent's, as in the county of Kent in England, in the southeast of England, Kent's Copper Rivet Distillery has just mistakenly released what they declared as Britain's first ever what? Now, this was not on the label or anything, but it was part of the kind of announcement and the noise that went along with it. They suggested that they had released Britain's first ever A, 100% organic release, B, 100% column distilled single malt, or C, 100% corn whiskey. Kent variant, says McCallan Fine and Rare. Now, we don't talk about those topics in here if we can at all avoid it, Doc. But aye, that's the same county that we're talking about. But they suggested when they released this, it was a 50 cl bottle, 500 ml bottle. It wasn't expensive, I don't think. I've not seen the price actually, but their malts, typically that I've seen, I think, is it the Malt House or the Mash House is a single malt, a 500 ml bottle as well, as about 45, 50 pounds. Smaller bottle, of course. But they suggested with this most recent release that it's the Britain's first ever, and they were mistaken. It's not true. 100% organic, 100% column distilled, or 100% corn whiskey. I can tell you that they felt they had released Britain's first ever 100% column distilled single malt. So as recently as last week, I shared a column distilled malt whiskey with you. It wasn't a single malt because of the Scotch whisky regulations. They can't call it single malt because it's been through a column still. England are not under the same restrictions, but they did not put single malt on the label. For over 100 years, we've been making malt in a column still. So it was nowhere close to being the first ever, but maybe the first ever as they could imagine. I'm not sure. I think I've got a picture of it here. Mast House. This release is called Mast House, and you can see they've just called it column malt whiskey, so the single malt has disappeared. 45% ABV seems odd to me, neither meat nor fish. Why is that 45? Is it unchill filtered and out at 45? Is it chill filtered at 45? Not sure. But there you go. That's a malt whiskey through a column still. Question 4, tasked with checking casks. This is a brilliant story. Tasked with checking casks, a recently appointed employee at Girvan Distillery is an odd news story because, why is it odd? A, because it's a previous master distiller. B, because it's a lumberjack. Or C, because it's not human. A new employee Girvan Distillery is an odd news story because A, it's a previous master distiller, B, it's a lumberjack, or C, it's not human. Oh, Helen is saying, oh, bugger, 2 out of 3. She had a wee bit of a banana skin. Blair Stevenson's not doing great tonight. He's on a donut for 3 so far. Don't want to be sitting on that donut for too long, Blair. You need to see if you can get the next couple right and bring things back on track a wee bit. Jimmy Legg is saying C, and I am human, but that's just a rumour. I know you to be human, Jimmy. I've seen you. Okay, I think most of you have got this right. Maybe because you know the great story, or maybe because you're just going on what's the most likely. The Singleton 54-year-old doc is saying is only 41% ABV, Roy. Wow, I guess at 54 years old, they couldn't quite get it to 55, right? It's pretty low. Wonderful. 3 out of 3 for Graham Fraser, still on a lag tonight. Graham, try refreshing the page. It might just simply be that you've pressed pause or something's caused it to pause. If you refresh, it should bring the chat and the stream back in sync together. Anyway, I can tell you that the answer you're looking for here is that it's not human. This is an amazing story. Look at this. This is Rocco, the Spaniel, actually a legitimate employee. He's not a pet. He's not like a distillery dog. He is trained to sniff out off or bad barrels at Girvan Distillery. That's what that dog is trained to do. Absolutely incredible. Now, I know that we've heard about dogs being able to sniff drugs and coronavirus and everything, but the fact that somebody's been thoughtful enough to consider, could a dog be trained to sniff bad barrels? Fascinating story. So there you go. Wonderful stuff. Rocco the Spaniel down at Girvan there. I got this clip, this screenshot, by the way, is taken from the Master of Malt blog. If anybody wants to read a wee bit more, they can go back. I think it's from about a week ago. You'll find that story there. Wonderful. Okay, Graham Fraser, another Graham Fraser picture that we've got here. I think this is quite an easy one tonight. I hope it is anyway, but I'm just going to ask you what distillery this is for question 5. Is it A, Glendronach, B, Glengrant, or C, Glenmorangie? A slightly snowy, wintry looking Glendronach, Glengrant, or Glenmorangie? What are we looking at here? Dog detects a leak, says BMO, on the cask. I wonder what his success rate is. I imagine it'd be pretty high. Hey, I'm trained for that too. What's the salary? Says Jimmy Legg. A salary and a change of citizenship, my friend. And Eric is saying, man's best friend indeed. What a pup, says Peter Lee. Absolutely everybody. Dirty Dog is celebrating, saying, finally see Scotch on the Bayou. Bruno Martins, everybody knows because of the giveaway giraffe colours here, surely, that this is a fairly easy picture question tonight. We're looking at Glenmorangie. We just see the kind of main little street that they have there. I think this is down on the left-hand side is the shop, and everything of any scale is off to the right-hand side here. But we are indeed up in the Highlands at Glenmorangie. Question 6. Which of these distilleries only has a single official core bottling of a 12-year-old at 43% ABV? I'm looking for a distillery that only has a core release, a regular core release at 43% ABV. Would that be A, Glenelgin? Would it be B, Fettercairn? Or would it be C, Nakandu? Which of those 3 distilleries only puts out a core release 12-year-old? In modern contemporary times, that's almost lazy, isn't it? Warner is saying, the one glassman is saying, I've been to Glenmorangie and still got it wrong. It's a kind of different kind of angle of Glenmorangie. You only just see that wee bit, the smaller buildings there. But Callan Fine and Rare says Jura. He's having a laugh, of course. Absolutely everybody more or less got this right on. Stewie Baby, unfortunately, buddy, and Nakandu also put out an 18, and they've featured the 21-year-old on the vPub as well, both core range. But indeed, Glenelgan only have a 43% 12-year-old. The other option there was Fettercairn. They have a 12-year-old at 42%, I think it is, bizarrely. But they also have other age statements as well as part of their refresh and rebranding. So I was looking for Glenelgan for that one. Question 7. Ardbeg distillery manager Colin Gordon has not worked at which of these Southern Islay whisky spots? Not worked. You have to pick out where he has not worked, as far as I'm aware at least. The CV I could find online did not list A, Port Ellen, B, Lagavulin, C, Laphroaig. Colin Gordon, distillery manager at Ardbeg. Where has he not held a position? Jimmy Jazz is quite right. He's put a wee banana skin emoji in there. Very nice touch, Jimmy. Excellent. This is splitting the crowd a wee bit. Graham Fraser's is celebrating a 5 out of 5 at the halfway point. Good stuff. Greg's Whiskey Guide is saying no idea too. Lots of people having no idea of Colin Gordon's CV, his resume, where he's been. But many, many, many of you know absolutely that it's, well, he was the manager of Port Ellen. Notice that I've written whiskey spots. Port Ellen isn't a distillery yet again. It's closed in 1983, but it is still a maltings and it needs a manager there. A manager that knows about grain and things like that. So he was out there at Port Ellen. He then became distillery manager at Lagavulin before finally taking the job in October last year at Ardbeg. But as far as I'm aware, he has never worked, he's certainly never had a managerial position at Laphroaig. So if you give yourself a wee point for answering C. The reason I put a banana skin in there was obviously the Port Ellen thing. It was unlikely that he was going to have ever worked at Port Ellen because it's been closed since 1983. But of course, the reason I wrote whiskey spots was to make you think about the maltings at Port Ellen. Question 8, you might get a wee assist on this if you're a member of the Facebook group, the Aquavite Barflies. Which new core 18-year-old release is now finished in Palo Cortado casks? Anybody that listens to me will know that I have an interest in Palo Cortado casks. I seem to have enjoyed the expressions I've tried thus far. Is it A, Deanston, B, Glenallachie, C, Royal Bracla? Which of those three, the new core, recently released 18-year-old, is finished in Palo Cortado? Palo Cortado is kind of one of these sherries that takes care of itself. It's when the floor doesn't form on top of the liquid. And what happens is the chalk mark that's to say the barrel's been checked, it gets a line through it to say that it's been cut. So Palo Cortado is literally stick cut or cut stick. Very knowledgeable folk. Maybe many, many, many of you are barflies and you saw the post in there the other day. This is expensive. It is indeed from Royal Bracla. It's an 18-year-old at £128. A wee bit like the 12-year-old. It's a bit more expensive. The 12-year-old is more expensive than the old 12-year-old, actually. But interestingly, £128, while it's still a wee bit on the wrong side of salty for me, it's a bit cheaper than the PX finished 18-year-old that it replaced. Or I don't know if it replaced it directly. But the old livery 18-year-old, the most recent release was a PX, and that was over £200. Crazy prices. So at least at £128, it's a wee bit more affordable to more. And I might be curious to kind of try and get a sample of this or something, and maybe make it a treat whiskey or something for me. But at £128 is a wee bit expensive. But it's Royal Bracla. I'm looking for a much more natural presentation, higher ABV from Royal Bracla as well. So we've got to celebrate that at the very least. 5 out of 8 for Stewie Baby. He's relieved already. Fantastic, with 2 questions still to go. Juice Jones is saying, even though I'm a fresh barfly, it didn't help me with this question. Sorry to hear, Juice. Sorry to hear. Question 9. Oh, there's a wee picture of the Royal Bracla, by the way. just so that you're not going to get confused with the kind of navy blue labelling. This is the new livery that's finished in Palo Cortado. Question 9. Glengyle's stills were previously used in which of these malt distilleries? Where are Glengyle's stills from? A. Bennevis, B. Inverleven, C. Ladyburn. Greg's Whisky Guide is spot on, saying go for indie bottlings then, Roy. As often for fillers, you can occasionally pick up good Royal Brackla's from Douglas Lang and other indie bottlers as well, to give you a different take on it. I have to say I was quite impressed by the 12-year-old Royal Brackla. I thought it was a big step up in presentation, a nice juicy take on sherry. Not quite the complexity and engagement I felt that the Glen Turret 12 had, but it's a wee bit cheaper than that. And we have to be excited about Royal Brackla bringing out that bump in presentation, what we've been asking for. Jimmy Legg is saying W is a great answer. This is splitting the crowd a wee bit. Some of you might have noticed, you might have worked out that every distillery I've listed here is actually a malt distillery that once existed inside a grain or alongside a grain complex. So Bennevis, for example, was up in the Highlands near inside Invergordon or alongside Invergordon. Inverleven was Dumbarton and Ladyburn was down in Girvan way before Ailsa Bay. But the answer I'm looking for tonight, Glengyle stills, were actually from Bennevis up in the Highlands. That's where Glengyle got the stills. And it's interesting because Bennevis was closed a long time ago. In fact, I think it was, I might be speaking out of turn here, but I think Bennevis was closed in the 70s. So those stills were sitting about inactive for a long time. Eric Cunliffe is saying, comeback of the century. Wow, is that for you, Eric? Are you doing quite well now? Have you come back a wee bit? One more question to go. Let's see how we're doing before we see. It's a wee bit of an asshat for the last one. 4 out of 9 for Dirty Dog. Still got a shot of a pass mark. Absolutely, I'll be rooting for you, buddy. I hope you do well. 7 out of 9 for Jason McDonald's Two Babies on 6. Greg's Whisky Guide on 5. And Ebhead on 7. Most of 1976, Scotty S is saying for Bennevis. Fantastic, Scotty. Thank you very much. 8 out of 9 for Tom Scaramuza. Madness. Listen, lots and lots of pass marks and lots of really healthy scores. I'm not seeing any 9 out of 9 scores that Doc predicted. He thought that there would be some big scores tonight. And Eric is saying, well, no, for the stills. Okay. Bennevis is notoriously not well loved. See, okay. Well, look what Glengyle was able to do with those wee stills, Quite amazing. Last question, wee bit of an asshat. Let me just have a wee bit of fun with this. What was the first brand of single malt to be deliberately finished with a declaration of additional maturation made on the label? So, finishing, double maturation, acing, however you want to call it, recasking. It's not a thing that's been around for 100 years. It's a relatively recent thing. Which distillery? There's an asshat here. Is said to have deliberately put that on the label. A. Dalmore. B. Glenmorangie. C. Balvenie. Molasses is suggesting Glen Asshat. If I ever opened my own distillery, Nathan, do you think that would be the name of it? Glen Asshat. This is not nearly as bad as it normally is, Aquavitae. Maybe there should be a banana skin as well as an asshat there, Jimmy. Ebhead is thinking it's Dalmore. Jimmy Jazz thinks it's Balvenie. Bruno Martins thinks it's Balvenie too. Bimo thinks it's B for Glenmorangie. Matt Brown thinks it's Glenmorangie. Jimmy Legacy and I like C for Balvenie. Fraser Thistle thinks, good to have you in, Fraser, thinks it's Dalmore. And Greg's Whisky Guide is saying the Portwood. Dirty Dog is saying, want to say B, but it's an asshat. I'm going to go C. Dirty Dog, you needed it for your pass mark, didn't you? I can tell you that it was, in fact, B. Feels like a punch in the gut for Dirty Dog. I'm sorry, my friend. It's Glenmorangie. Everybody talks about the classic Balvenie. Bear with me, Dirty Dog. There is a lifeline coming for you here. Everybody talks about Balvenie and its Doublewood, which was originally 10 years before the Doublewood came out in the early 90s. Early 80s, the Doublewood was originally called the Classic, and that was the first one to use that double maturation thing, the bourbon cask, the sherry cask. But on the Classic, it was never on the label. It wasn't until the 90s that the Doublewood put it on the label. Glenmorangie had the 1963 release out in the mid-80s, and 1963 release, imagine, right? And they actually celebrated it on the label, and it's now acknowledged to be the first to have done that. So Glenmorangie is actually what I was looking for. However, look at this. Free banana skin points if you answered Balvenie, because the Classic is so often held up to be that release, to be that whiskey that first started all of that activity, that extra evolution, that recasking, that additional maturation. If you answered C for Balvenie, take the points on me. Free banana skin points. So there you go. It's because you said it was an ASAC question, so we dropped to Glenmorangie. Yes, because I assume that everybody thinks that it's the Balvenie. It's widely understood to be the Balvenie. So, but I'm putting it down there. If you answered B or C tonight, they're so close together in time that there's probably going to be internal arguments between the two companies, which of them did it first. If you can take your points for B or C. So Dirty Dog, take your pass mark to the bank, my friend. Take it. Jerry Miller has bought me a wee dram. We don't need the 10 emoji. We need an I passed with 5 emoji. Amazing, Jerry. Absolutely amazing. Well done, everyone. Well done for your sportsmanship and just having a bit of fun with it. That's what it's all about. Gregor Dykeman has said 8 out of 10. Glad I came back and doing better than last week. Good to have you, Gregor. Please don't stay away because you're scared of the quiz. It's always just meant to be a wee bit of fun. You don't need to share your scores ever, and you're only ever playing against yourself, as I often say. Tom Scaramouche is saying I'll take 9, 8.5. Who knows? Out of 10. That's a brilliant score, Tom. Absolutely fantastic. And Jimmy Legg is saying, he's got a clock. Time. It's 15:15. That's me an hour and a half in tonight, isn't it? At least it's okay. It's the vPub. And it's just me. No wonder it's so difficult when I've got guests in. I hope you found that of some interest tonight, just talking about the youthfulness of whiskey, how it doesn't always have to be off-putting. And if we are asking for non-age statements, are we ready for the answers? Do we really want to know the age of some of these things? Will it change how we interact and how we judge these whiskies? Will it change what we consider paying for them? All of these things. Can we accept that there's a place for non-age statements in some scenarios? But it would be nice if the regulations, even in that case, allowed for some extra description, let's say, more information on the label or on a website, or make it easier for people to convey how and why they've put together the vattings for the releases, all of these things. However, the takeaway from tonight is surely got to be something I don't ever need to say. And that is that you judge the glass on how you are enjoying it. And if it's something you enjoy and you get along well with, that's all that matters, surely. Anybody that's a patron will be able to hang out with me for a really cool blind tasting session on Sunday night. I'm sure that these are unicorn whiskies that's been sent to me by Cato in Norway. I've only smelled the sample bottles. I've only had my nose in there. But my goodness, they tell a story of being something very, very different. I'm convinced that they're bucket lister whiskies. Anyway, that's for patrons. That's a lock-in on Sunday night. And then I'll be back with you a week from tonight for another scheduled vPub with Leanne, Scotch on the Bayou, and with Aeneas O'Hara from Away from the Ordinary to talk about planning and considering what you're going to get out of your whiskey-themed trip to Scotland. Albeit 2022 and beyond, of course, it's going to be difficult for you all this year, I understand. But the reason I'm doing it this year is because you need to be thinking about it now, and I'm sure so many of you are. I'm going to nominate a dram of the night tonight. I'm going to say the one that I want to reach back, the one I'm most interested to reach out and have another sip of, interestingly, is this Torabhaig, which is one of the youngest here, a 3-year-old. I think after the Ardbeg and certainly that Ben Nevis has become very light now. Very light. And I didn't put water in any of these tonight, so I'll maybe do that when I'm tidying up and doing some housework, doing my bookmarks and chapter markers. Anyway, thank you all so much. Graham Fraser is saying, thanks, Roy Agavidi. Good session tonight, despite several drams in Glasgow tonight. Good for you, Graham. Where are you? I think you're in the East Coast, Graham, are you not? Erwin Laranaga is in. Good to see you. What time on Sunday? It'll be 9 p.m. It's always a 9 p.m., a slightly earlier time for me on a Sunday night, Erwin. I hope it suits you, my friend, and I hope you can make it there. If I'm not here on Sunday, Jimmy Legg is saying I'll wear my ass as a hat. I'm sure you're going to be there, Jimmy. I wonder what's going to happen when you're not there one night. Can you imagine? How's it going to be? It's not even going to be a valid vPub or lock-in, is it? I thank you for a wonderful vPub. Slancha says Andrew Hammaker. Thank you, Andrew, for being here and enjoying it. Dirty Dog is saying, cheers, Roy. Thanks for the fun time in the vPub. You're very welcome, my friend. I'm glad you enjoyed it too. Rolf is saying good night. Scotch on the Bayou is saying she's excited about being on next week. Jerry Miller as well is saying good afternoon or evening or morning to you all. Jerry Miller, you're absolutely right. Aaron Edgerton, is in saying, thanks, Roy. I'm from Brisbane, Australia. So exactly as was being mentioned there, it's morning for you. So it's good to have you in, Aaron. Juice Jones is saying, great show again. I found a new interest in young whiskies just based on your honest enthusiasm. Good. Just an open mind is all I'm asking for, and not spending too much money. That's crucial. Peter Lee, thanks for a great evening. Wonderful to have you in, Peter. Matt Brown is saying, Slancha Roy, fascinating topic tonight. Look forward to the next one. Jerry Miller, good night, Roy. I'll be live next Thursday if the weather is bad. All right, okay, so you're hoping to get out and enjoy some sunshine. Wouldn't that be nice? And the reminder is set, says Erwin, fantastic, and Gregor Dickman is saying, see you all next week. I'm going to raise this wee glass of rather delightful, delicate yet powerful Torabhaig at 3 years older, 2017 vintage, and say I'm going to enjoy my time with this one. I've enjoyed my time with all of you tonight. I'm going to raise this glass and tell you all, of course, that you're very dearly loved, and I look forward to hanging out with you on Sunday night if you're a patron, and if not, I'll see you a week from tonight on Thursday. Thank you all for hanging out with me this evening. Slancha. Aye.